What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about X-Force. You see, after Fatal Attractions for X-Force leading into the Phalanx Covenant crossover, they had a lot going on. You had the return of Nimrod. You had the return of the Mutant Liberation Front. You also had Cable finally figure out what is his actual origin and his connection to Strife. There was a lot going on leading into the Phalanx Covenant crossover. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to go ahead and take all those different videos and combine them together into one big video. And so with that being said, guys, I do hope you enjoy today's full story video. Okay, so it's time for us to get back into our coverage over the X-Men. Now, we are officially done covering Fatal Attractions, and that went on for a good while there, but it's now time for us to work our way up to the next crossover. Now, with that being said, we're going to pick up with X-Force issue number 27 and 28. Now, this is a two-part story arc that's really picking up from X-Force issue number 26, where we were introduced to a new character known as Rainfire. Now, when it comes to Rainfire, in our last video for X-Force back in issue number 26, we saw him being able to break out different members of the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, that was an organization of characters we had talked about before in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men. Now, originally, the different members of this group was being led by a character known as Strife. Now, as we all know, when it came to the end of the Executioner's song, Cable and Strife both had disappeared. Now, Cable, he's back, but Strife has not come back yet. But with him being gone, it kind of left the door open for somebody else now to take over as the actual leader of the group. And that was a character known as Rainfire. Now, we don't know much about Rainfire just yet, but over time, we're going to learn more about this character. And so getting into the opening pages of today's video, we do pick up with the, members of the Mutant Liberation Front as they're making a move right now on Henry Gyrich. Now, we have talked a lot about this character before, but when it comes to Henry Gyrich, he's part of the government, but also part of Project Wide Awake. Now, when it comes to Project Wide Awake, the main purpose of that whole entire project is to make different kind of things that could possibly be used down the road to help fight against the mutant race if the relation between humans and mutants truly gets bad. But on top of that, their goal is to keep tabs on the mutant race, on every single faction out there that could possibly attack the human race. And so for Henry Gyrich, he's kind of like the person in charge of that project. Now, when it comes to the MLF group, their main goal right now is to break into his base and get their hands on him, take him as a prisoner. But for Henry, he always has some kind of plan up his sleeve. And so we kind of find out that for Henry Gyrich, he had created a new thing called biosentries. Now, biosentries are people who were given cybernetic body parts as a way to fight against different kinds of targets. And so right now, we're seeing the first of many to come down the road. And his name is Hardaway. Now, the battle is very short-lived. But at first, it does seem like that the Mutant Liberation Front is going to have a hard time fighting against a character like this. But then we kind of find out they have two new team members on their team. One of them is Moonstar and the other one is Locust. Now, when it comes to Moonstar, she's been around for a good while. And the reason why, because this is Danny Moonstar being part of the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, when we last saw her, she left for Asgard. And the question is right now, why is she no longer in Asgard? But on top of that, why is she right now working for the Mutant Liberation Front? Now, when it comes to Locust, this is her making her first appearance ever in Marvel Comics. Now, when it comes to Locust, she has the ability to teleport also to fly, but also being able to shoot out energy out of her hand. Now, with all that being said, you have Locust and also Moonstar being able to work together to bring down Hardaway just like that. And then you have our not heroes, bad guys here, being able to get their hands on Henry Gyrich just like that. Now, as soon as the MLF group got their hands on Henry Gyrich, they expressed their hatred for the man. And the reason why, because he is well known across the world, especially in America, that he hates the mutant race, that he is down with the idea of finding different ways to prove that mutants are evil, that mutants are killers, and they should all be killed off or at least locked up to protect the human race. And matter of fact, you have the MLF group say, look at how far you would go to try to get rid of us. You turn a regular man into a cyborg basically as a way to attack us, and he still failed. That's your problem right there. You're trying to prove that mutants and humans cannot live together, that mutants are truly evil. Either way, you do have Locust being able to open up a portal to allow the group to leave just like that. But now we have to jump over to Washington, D.C. Now, when we do, we pick up with four different people having a meeting: Charles Xavier, Forge, Val Cooper, and Nick Fury. Now, you have all four characters coming together to figure out which team is going to go out of their way to save the life of Henry Gyrich. Now, you have Charles say, unfortunately, his X-Men cannot be used for this mission because they had just dealt with a civil war over in Genosha. For X Factor, it will look pretty bad if a mutant team is being used to fight against another mutant team. Because remember, X Factor is working for the government. And so for Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., it's also a no. And so for Val Cooper, that means only one team left to use. And of course, that would be X-Force. But now we have to jump back over to the Mutant Liberation Front and their new base. Now, their new base is actually an old base that belonged to Magneto in the way early days of Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men. Now, with all that being said, we're going to shift our focus over to a character called Tempo. Now, she's been around for a good while in Marvel Comics. Matter of fact, she first appeared back in New Mutants. But for Tempo, she's also one of the founding members of the Mutant Liberation Front. But we're kind of seeing right now that she kind of hates the idea of being part of this team. She hates the idea of what the team represents. And so it kind of left to believe in the possibility that she might leave. But for right now, she's not going to leave. And the only reason why, because she is scared of what could happen to her if she tries to leave the team behind. But let's go ahead and shift our focus over to Rainfire to kind of learn what is his actual goals for the new version of the Mutant Liberation Front. And so he has this meeting with Henry Gyrich. Now, his plan is to use Henry as a way to inspire more mutants to fight alongside with him, because Henry Gyrich is the perfect example of a human who's part of the American government who would do anything to possibly get rid of the entire mutant race. And matter of fact, he does bring up different things that Henry has done over time with Project Wide Awake that could have been used as a way to eliminate the entirety of the mutant race. And so you have Rainfire saying, my goal is to liberate the mutant race away from the human race. First, we're going to start with America, but then after that, the entire world. But later on that night, we do pick up with X-Force on the outside of the base of the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, they're in three different teams. The first team is Cable and also Pharaoh. Team 2, Siren, Shatterstar, and Warpath. Team 3, Boom Boom, Sunspot, Richter, and Cannonball. Now, when it comes to Cable and Pharaoh, their main goal is to get Henry and get the heck out of there, while the other two teams will fight against the different members of the Mutant Liberation Front. And so the plan is a go. And so you have our heroes begin to go through their plans. Now, at first, everything is working out for them until you have Cannonball just go down in a matter of seconds. Somebody was able to hit his mind pretty hard. And so you have our heroes quickly find out that it is Danny Moonstar, who's now part of, well, the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, when it comes to Danny, she does have a new kind of power where she's now able to shoot these psionic arrows at her targets. And once they do hit their targets, well, they give that person nightmares of their worst fears. And so right now, Sam is just going through a nightmare at the moment, but he is down. Before our heroes are kind of confused on why in the world is Moonstar now on the side of evil? Why in the world is she helping out the Mutant Liberation Front? Now for Team 2, which is Siren, Warpath, and also Shatterstar, you do have our three characters fighting against other members of the Mutant Liberation Front. Now the battle does go on for a good amount of few pages, but by the end of this section, we do see that for Shatterstar, he does have the ability to kill off Reaper this time, a member of the MLF group. But then he has to stop because one of his own is now a hostage, and that would be Siren. And you have Wild Child say, if you don't let go of my team member, I'm going to kill off Siren here in a matter of seconds. Now, let's not forget about team number 3. Their main goal, or sorry, team 1, which is Cable and Pharaoh. Let's not forget that their main goal is to get, well, Henry Gyrich the heck out of there. Now, for Henry, he's kind of surprised to see X-Force because, again, when it comes to X-Force around the 1990s, they were kind of like the more aggressive team out of all the different X teams, like Excalibur or X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, and also X-Factor. He thought like, hey, I might get SHIELD or at least X-Factor or some other government team like the Avengers. But unfortunately, he has X-Force. Now for Cable, he wants to break out Henry Gyrich. The problem is, as he tries to break out Henry, he's then confronted and attacked by Rainfire, the leader of the Mutant Liberation Front. And so as we dive into X-Force issue number 28, we do pick up with Cable fighting against Rainfire. Now, while you have those two characters fighting against one another, I kind of want to shift our focus over to Pharaoh. And here's the reason why. Because Pharaoh was always the wild card on X-Force. And let me explain. You see, for the rest of the team, they knew from right from wrong. They had their heads on their shoulders. But for Pharaoh, it kind of seemed like they always had to keep a leash on her because if they did not, she would go basically crazy or try to be an evil character. And so right now you have Henry saying like, you know what? Even though you're trying to save my life while Cable is fighting against Rainfire, I'm going to use my words to play with your mind, to kind of bring out the true side of you. And the reason why, because this is Henry Gyrich trying to prove a point that basically mutants are killers. Mutants are evil. But also with Henry, we're going to learn a tad bit more about the origin of Pharaoh. Because honestly, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men or X-Force, we have not learned much about her. The only thing we know about her so far is that she has a sister that first appeared in the early days of X-Force comics. Now, I want to jump back over to Shatterstar because he's still trying his best to save his teammate Siren from the hands of Wildside. Now, here's the thing, because if Shatterstar makes a move, Wildside is going to kill off Siren. And so you have Wildside tell Shatterstar, go ahead and drop your blade. And I might, just might, let your teammate go. Now, this is where we learn a new power of Shatterstar, where he is able to send out a shockwave out of different metals around him. So for example, his blade is made out of metal. And so with that blade made out of metal, he was able to send out a huge shockwave to throw off Reaper and Wildside so that he'll be able to save Siren. And then by the end of this section, we learn that Warpath was able to take down his opponent as well. So for the most part, X-Force were able to take out most of the members of the Mutant Liberation Front. I'm gonna jump back over to the other team, Team 3, where you have Sunspot, Boom Boom, Richter, and Cannonball. Now remember, they had just discovered the fact that their old teammate Moonstar is now working with the Mutant Liberation Front, and they can't believe in the idea that she would do that. And so, as you have our heroes trying their best to fight against her, they're also fighting against the other character known as Locust. Now, when it comes to Moonstar, she does shoot one of her psionic arrows once again, except this time you have Sunspot grab Locust and pull him and her right in front of the actual arrow, and then they all just disappear. But now we're able to shift our focus back onto Pharaoh once again. Now, when we do, this is the moment where we can officially say, like, okay, Pharaoh might leave X-Force. She was that wild card the entire time on the team. And the reason why I'm saying that, guys, is because when we jump over to Pharaoh and also Henry Gyrich, he continues to talk about her. He's kind of like, you're not like the others. You hate me. You want me dead. Now, here's the thing. A lot of mutants who are part of the X-Men teams, they don't like Henry. But for Pharaoh, it's kind of like, yeah, I might not like you, but I also want to see you die. I might even try to kill you off as well. And so because of those kind of thoughts in her head, and for Henry, he knows who she is, he's kind of like, you're no better than the other mutants you're fighting against. The ones out there who want to see me and the rest of the humans die. Now, we also learn from Henry that something happened to her younger brother and her younger sister. But on top of that, she's not allowed to go back home to her mother's house. Now, for Pharaoh, once you have Henry say those things to her, she wants to attack him. But then she's stopped by Tempo. And that's why I said earlier that we might see a change in the actual roster of X-Force, because now you are talking about the idea of Pharaoh going on the other side and Tempo possibly taking her place on X-Force. Either way, you do have the two characters begin to fight against one another. Now we have to shift our focus back onto Cable and also Rainfire, and here's the reason why. Because while you have the two characters fighting against one another, it's also Cable trying to prove a point that he's trying to show the young X-Force members from right from wrong, to how to make sure they stay on the path of good. And right now for Rainfire, he's only showing them the path of evil, the path of wrong. But then out of nowhere, you have Rainfire call Cable by his real name. And that would be Nathan Dayspring. Now, this is kind of huge because now we're kind of left to believe that Rainfire could most likely be somebody close to Cable. But the question is right now, what is the actual origin of Rainfire? Who is he? But either way, you didn't have Siren take out Rainfire before Cable was able to get any more information out of him. Now you do have Rainfire being able to easily just jump back into the battle, but when he does, it's really more of Rainfire kind of saying, listen, if we kill off Henry Gyrich, we are saving the lives of millions of mutants across the world. Now here's the thing, it's only if. Like, what if we do kill off Gyrich? We might, just might be able to save the lives of millions of mutants, but there's still a possibility that you might not save the lives of millions of mutants across the world. But either way, you have Rainfire get in the head of Pharaoh and tell her, like, listen, I know that you want blood, that you want to kill him all because how bad truly he is towards the mutant race. And just like that, she's down with the idea of killing off Henry Gyrich. Now, Cable is able to stop her, but it really shows that, yeah, she's going to be off X-Force and most likely going to join the other side. And so as we get into the ending of today's video, we do pick up with Locust and Moonstar trying to take out another member of X-Force, and that would be Siren. Now here comes the big catch, because luckily for Siren, you have Sunspot being able to get right in front of the blast. But here comes the big problem though, because earlier, we saw that when it came to Sunspot and Locust powers, their powers do not combine very well. It does announce some kind of huge feedback. And so once again, we're seeing another feedback. where out of nowhere you have everyone up in the sky teleport away just like that. So, for example, the entire team of the Mutant Liberation Front is gone, except for Tempo. She was too far away from the blast radius, so she'll now be with X-Force. But Sunspot, he was in that radius, and so he is gone just like that. Pharaoh, also gone just like that. And so now for Cable, he's wondering, oh my God, where is Sunspot and where is Pharaoh? I have now lost two members of my team, and that right there is not okay. But this is what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, we have wrapped up our coverage over Fatal Attractions, but now we must work our way up to the next crossover. Now, before we're able to do that, we have to cover some other stories that lead into that next crossover. Like, for example, Cable issues 6, 7, and 8. Now, this is called Fathers and Sons. And honestly, it's really important when it comes to the character of Cable because we are finally going to get that answer of who is actually the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Is it Strife or is it Cable? It has to be one of them, which means the other one has to be a clone. Now, technically, we had learned back in the Executioner song that Strife was supposedly the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, and Cable was the clone. But this story arc right here says, that is actually wrong. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. And so as we get into the opening pages of today's video, we do pick up with two characters, Tyler and also Zero. Now, I kind of want to sit down and talk about Tyler first. And here's the reason why. Okay, so Tyler is the son of Cable from the far future as well. But here's the catch. You see, for Tyler, he was on his father's side, but there was a point in time where you had Strife being able to take over the mind of Tyler, and of course turn Tyler against his father, Cable. Now, there was a point in time where you had Tyler actually try to hurt another team member of Cable, and so Cable had no choice but to go ahead and take his son down to save the life of that teammate of Cable. Now, here is the catch though. You see, after that, you didn't have Tyler go back in time. Now, when he did go back in time, he took up a new name, better known as Mr. Tolliver. Now, and back in the past, he was an arms dealer. And so when Cable came back in time as well, for Cable, he had no idea that Tyler was Tolliver. Instead, all he knew was he had to bring down Tolliver. And so that was his goal in the early days of X-Force Comics and also New Mutants as well. Now, at the end of the early days of X-Force Comics, going into the I want to say the Executioner song storyline, you had Cable being able to defeat Tolliver, but still not knowing that Tolliver was his son. Now, later on in Cable issue 5, Cable learned that Tolliver was his son Tyler, who also came back in time as well. Now let's shift our focus over to Zero. Now Zero is better known as an Atom. Now Atom are a special kind of robots. There's only two of them ever made in Marvel Comics, 0 and 11. Now, we had talked about 11 before, but when it comes to 0, he was the prototype for the Atom program. Now, Atom stands for Ambient Energy Dampening Automated Peacekeeping Mechanism. Atom, or atoms, plural for the S part. Anyways, though, when it comes to Zero, he is the first one, right? And he was made by the Ascanis. Now, we have not officially talked about the Ascanis before just yet. As a matter of fact, we'll talk more about them down the road in this video, but also other videos in the later parts of our coverage over the X-Men. Now, when it comes to Atom, he was seriously damaged but founded by Strife. When Strife was defeated back in the Executioner song, he was then found by Tyler. Now, when it comes to Atom, his main goal is to, well, keep peace. Peacekeeping is part of his whole name. But the problem is right now, his system has been modified thanks to Tyler. Now, this is where we learn what Tyler wants to do in this story arc. You see, for Tyler, he's now realizing that he had his mind messed with by Strife. Now, when his mind was messed with by Strife, like I said earlier, he attacked a fellow team member of Cable's. Now, you did have Cable being able to stop Tyler as a way to save the life of his team member. But that's the problem right there for Tyler. He hates the idea that his father decided to save the life of his team member and not his own son. Now, for Zero, he tries his best to explain things to Tyler, like, dude, Cable had no choice. He knew your mind was messed with so bad, he had no choice to go ahead and take you down to save the life of his fellow team member. But for Tyler, it does not matter at all. And so for Tyler, he wants only one thing: to get revenge against the people who have ruined his life, starting off with Cable, but also another person as well. But now we have to jump over to Cable. Now, when we do, we see that Cable is standing over the grave of Madeline Pryor. Now, let's not forget, for Cable, he still believes that he is the clone of Strife, that Strife is the real son of Cyclops and also Madeline Pryor. Now, you do have Cable be confronted by Domino. Now, for Domino, she's kind of wondering why in the world was she called over here to the grave of Madeline Pryor. And so then you have Cable tell her, like, listen, I have something very important to tell you. The whole idea of Mr. Tolliver. You see, you have Cable tell Domino that Tolliver was his son Tyler, who had also came from the future as well. Now for Domino, she wants to know why in the world would his son come back in time to become an arms dealer. But before you have the two characters being able to talk to one another about that subject, they're then confronted by Mr. Sinister. Now, as we all know, when it comes to Sinister, he loves to play with Summer's DNA. But this is Sinister saying, listen, Cable, you still believe that Madeline Pryor is the mother to Strife and not you. Here's the thing, you're completely wrong. You are the real son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Strife is your clone. But now we have to jump over to the school of Charles Xavier. Now, when we do, we pick up with a character known as Ascani. Now, when it comes to Ascani, she belongs to a clan called, well, Ascani as well. Now, for Ascanis, their main goal is to protect the Chosen One. And the Chosen One is Cable. That also means protecting his parents as well. Now, here's the thing. This is not our first time seeing Ascani, because back in X Factor Endgame, when you had Apocalypse give young Nathan the techno-organic virus, you had a different Ascani appear to take that Cable into the far future to save his life. Now, with that being said, in that far future, we had learned that apparently the Ascanis are a clan of people who are trying their best to fight against the forces of Apocalypse, who technically rules that future. Now, here's the thing. For Cable, he came back in time to make sure that future does not happen at all. But either way, for this Ascani, she came back in time to protect Cyclops and Jean Grey. And so that is why she's currently at the home of Charles Xavier to watch over those two characters. The parents of Strife are possibly Cable. But getting back over to Cable, Domino, and also Mr. Sinister, you had Sinister telling Cable that he was the one who had created Madeline Pryor, the clone of Jean Grey. And the reason why, because the genetics of Cyclops and Jean Grey would produce a very powerful child. And so with Madeline being a clone of Jean Grey and still getting with Cyclops, they could still produce a powerful child. Now, with all that being said, you didn't have Domino wondering what went wrong. Like, yay, you created Madeline Pryor. That's great. But what went wrong when it came to Strife? Now, you had Sinister say, hey, listen, I did not create him. I only created her. And that is it. Somebody else made him. But you didn't have Sinister say, hey, by the way, Cable, yeah, you are the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. But there is one more thing I have to say to you. Do not let time take control of your life. You need to learn how to master time yourself. And then right after saying that, and before he disappears, he plays with the mind of Cable. The reason why? To release a powerful person back out into the world, and that person would be Strife. Sinister was able to put the mind of Strife into the body of Cable. And the question is right now, how was he able to do that? Because, like I said, back in the Executioner song, at the end of that crossover, we were left to believe that Cable and Strife had both officially died. Now, Cable came back out of nowhere, but not Strife. And so now it seems like Sinister was able to bring Strife back to life, but also giving him the ability to take over the body of Cable. Now, for the Ascani, she realized that Strife has returned, and she knows that she has to protect Cyclops and Jean Grey. The problem is when she tries to go into the home of Cyclops and Jean Grey, well, that is when she's stopped by Tyler and Zero. Now, she's very confused on why in the world Tyler has an Atom robot with him. But you had Tyler say, hey, listen, don't worry about that right now. Right now, I need you to come with me because you're very important for me to learn everything I need to know about my father. And so just like that, bam, they disappeared. And so now Jean Grey and Cyclops are somewhat left defenseless. Well, not really, because you didn't have Jean Grey realize that she felt some kind of cry out there, a psychic cry out there in the world. And she realized that kind of cry came from one person. And she knows who's now back in their time once again. And that would be good old Strife. So as we get into Cable issue number 7, we do pick up with Tyler once again. Now the Ascani, she's now a prisoner of Tyler. Now we also learn here that it was Tyler who kind of told Sinister to go find Cable to help release Strife in the mind of Cable. And the reason why, because for Tyler, he wants to go ahead and kill off Strife and Cable in one good swoop. But we also see the reason why he had kidnapped or taking the Ascani as a hostage is to learn the entire history of Cable in a very short period of time. Now, for the Ascani, with her now being a prisoner, technically, she has no choice here. She has to go ahead and show him what he wants to know about his father. But getting back over to Strife, who's now in the body of Cable, you didn't have Strife, go back over to Camp Verde. Now, Camp Verde is the base for X-Force. And so while you have Strife in the room of Cable, cutting off his or shaving off his goatee, you didn't have Siren walk into the room. Now, when it comes to the earlier parts of our coverage over X-Force and Cable Comics, we kind of saw in the possibility that Siren and Cable could possibly get together. And she also realized there's something off with Cable, but she has no idea what it is. Now for Strife, he does not remember her name at all, but he does know that she must be somebody close to Cable in a more romantic kind of way. Either way, you have Strife, use his powers in the mind of Siren to knock her out. And not just her, he also knocks out Richter as well. Now, let's not forget, when it comes to Richter, for a long time, he believed that Cable was the one who had killed off his father because he saw the face of Strife. And because Strife and Cable had the same face, he believed it was Cable the entire time who had killed off his father, not knowing it was actually Strife. Now, he did find out later on, but at the same time, he still does not believe Cable at all. But he heard Siren scream. And so you have Richter try to confront Cable, who's right now being possessed by Strife. Either way, you have Strife go ahead and knock out Richter as well and leaves Camp Verde behind. Now let's go ahead and transition back over to Jean Grey and Cyclops, because for Jean Grey, let's not forget that she is not really the mother of Cable. Her clone was, Madeline Pryor, but when it came to X-Men Inferno, for Jean Grey, she had absorbed the mind of Madeline Pryor. So she has all the different kinds of memories that Madeline had when she was being a mother to baby Nathan. And so for Jean Grey, as she does watch old home videos of Madeline and also Nathan and Scott Summers as well, she remembers those things, but again, it was not really her. It's completely messed up. Now you have Cyclops walk into the room, and he's kind of hurt as well because he hates the idea that he had a son and he had no choice but to go ahead and give his son up. But also, let's not forget, For Cyclops and Jean Grey, they still believe that Strife is their son, a crazy mutant from the future. Now, for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're also kind of wondering in the possibility if they can have children. Now, you have Charles walk into the room and say, yes, you should still have the ability to have children because even though you are heroes, you're kind of like policemen and firemen, and they have families as well. But for Cyclops, he's afraid of the idea of producing another child that could most likely become Strife once again. But then you have Domino walk into the room. She said, you're wrong. Strife is not your son. Cable is your son. But now we have to jump back over to Tyler. Now you have Tyler using the Ascani as a way to learn the entire origin of his father. Now we do pick up at the moment where you have Cyclops having no choice but to go ahead and give up baby Nathan over to an Ascani. Now that Ascani did take Cable into the far future, but let's not forget that he was infected with the techno-organic virus given to him by Apocalypse. And so when young baby Nathan arrived in the future, he was then confronted by Mother Ascani, the person in charge of the entire clan. But she didn't realize that they were too late going back in time to save young Cable because now he is infected with the techno-organic virus. And we also learn in this future that Apocalypse rules the future. And so she was hoping to bring young Cable here as a way to bring down Apocalypse to free their world. But now, unfortunately, the young baby Nathan is fighting for his life, fighting against the techno-organic virus. Now, we also kind of find out that they believed that young Nathan was going to die right then and there. And they said, we have no choice. We have to go ahead and clone him and use the clone as a way to bring down Apocalypse. But getting back over to Cyclops, Jean Grey, Charles Xavier, and also Domino, they head over to Camp Verde because for Domino, she knows that for Cable, if he wants to go after somebody, he's going to need some weapons first. And the best place to get weapons is the base of X-Force, Camp Verde. Except when they do arrive at Camp Verde, they find both Richter and Siren knocked out. Now, Charles was able to heal their minds, but after doing that, you did have Domino find a video. Now, the way the video is being told to us is kind of like he left this video just in case he has died. It is kind of like, hey, if I'm gone, play this video, and here's my final message. Now, for Charles Xavier, he kind of believes in the possibility that there were moments in the past where Strife was able to take over the mind of Cable, meaning that there has been times where Strife has been in the mind of Cable, but just waiting for the right moment to take over the body of Cable. Now, with all that being said, you did have our heroes realize if they're able to capture Cable, who's right now being possessed by Strife, they could also find the cure for the legacy virus. And remember, that virus right now is killing off mutants left and right across the board. And so their main goal for the last few months or a year now has been trying to find the cure for the legacy virus. And right now, it does seem like their best chance is to get a hold of the body of Cable. Now, the ending of the second chapter is really more of Strife being able to sneak his way into the base of Tyler. Now, for Tyler, he's still holding on to the Ascani as a hostage. But then out of nowhere, you didn't have her say, someone else is here in the base right now. And she's like, oh my God, it's him. But right after realizing who it is, you have Strife, again, who's right now using the body of Cable, destroy the body of the Ascani. And once Tyler turns around, he realized that his base is now being attacked by, well, his father, but his father who's right now being controlled by Strife. Now, as we get into the final chapter, we kind of learn a tad bit more about Strife here. And the reason why I'm saying that, because remember, when it came to the end of the Executioner song, we saw Cable and also Strife be destroyed by the time vortex. Now, we learn here that apparently Cable was able to survive and come out of it, but Strife's body was destroyed, but his mind stayed alive. His mind was able to transfer over to the body of Cable. Now, that'll be explained a tad bit more here in a moment, but for Strife, This is where he finds out that he is the clone of Cable, that in reality, he was never the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. It was Cable, and he cannot accept the fact that he is the clone. Now, we also kind of find out the Ascani is still alive only for like two more pages here, because you didn't have Strife say like, listen, I don't know why you're here because your entire clan, your sisterhood has been killed off. But she says, if I'm still here right now, that means that my clan is still alive, which means that clan was able to send me back in time to protect Cyclops and Jean Grey. And oh, by the way, I had warned them that you have returned. And so because of that right there, we kind of find out that it was not Strife's scream or his powerful mind reaching out to Jean Grey. It was the Ascani reaching out to Jean Grey, telling her like, hey, listen, Strife is back and you need to be on your A game. Now for Strife, he realized that Cyclops and Jean Grey now know that he is back. That means his plans are going to fall apart. And so with them being so upset, he kills off the Ascani, but her spirit and body or her energy goes over to the mind of Tyler. And so you have Tyler say, it's so wild and crazy that you still don't believe the fact that you are the clone of Cable. But you know what? Our minds were connected, my mind to hers. And so when she died, her mind came to my body, which means now I'm able to show you everything you need to know about the actual truth of Cable and you. But now we jump over to the X-Men, who are now having a conversation with Zero. Now, this is Zero explaining everything to the X-Men like, listen, the reason why Strife is back because what happened at the end of the Executioner song. Let me explain, y'all. So as we all know, the Time Vortex had destroyed, or we were left to believe had destroyed both Cable and Strife. We kind of find out that Cable has survived, but he was sent into the far future where you had a group of scientists or doctors being able to repair the body of Cable. Now, when it came to Strife, his body was completely destroyed, but his mind survived, and his mind was able to attach to the body of Cable. But once doing that, his mind was pushed in the back to allow Cable to continue to control his body. But then, of course, you had Sinister come in and release the mind of Strife to allow Strife to take over the body of Cable. Now, with all that being said, the only reason why Sinister got involved because Tyler called Sinister to allow Strife to take over the body of Cable. So that when he kills off Cable, he's also killing off Strife as well. Now, for the X-Men, they once again get confirmation that yes, Cable is the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. And you also had Jean Grey realize it was the Ascani who had reached out to her to warn her that Strife has returned. But now we're able to transition back over to Strife. Now, for Strife, it's him kind of learning everything that happened to him and why he is the clone of good old Cable. Because right after you had the Ascani being able to clone Cable and to make Strife, Apocalypse forces attacked their base. And they were only able to grab Cable. They were not able or fast enough to grab Strife as well. And so you had some folks stay behind and try their best to grab Strife, but they were killed off. And so then you had Apocalypse being able to get Strife, not knowing that he has the clone of the baby that he was actually looking for. And so this is the moment where you as Strife realize that yes, my dude, you are the clone of Cable. You are not the original one at all. Now, we get into the idea of the X-Men arriving just in time to fight against Strife. Now, this whole entire section is really more of different people trying to show Strife that he is a failure. Now, what I mean by that actual statement is really more him kind of realizing that he has let down the actual idea of being a Summer. Because if you look at the other Summers like Cyclops, Havoc, and even also Cable, they had continued on to be a force of good. He's the only one in the bloodline who unfortunately turned to the side of evil. And so it's them begging him, listen, if you are a Summer, you should try to be good just like us. And so for Strife, he kind of realized that maybe they are right. But he also realized that he can still have the last laugh because again, he has the cure to the legacy virus. And so when you have Strife finally let go of the body of Cable, he also takes with him the cure to the legacy virus. But now it's time for us to talk about the ending. And honestly, the ending is kind of sad. That last page right there, because you didn't have Cable being able to finally introduce himself over to Charles Xavier. But after doing that, well, hold on quick. I want to say that this is the first time you have these two characters meeting in person and being able to talk to one another in the X-Men timeline. Anyways, when it comes to Cyclops, he wants to have that conversation with his son. He's all like, listen, you're my son. Like, we should talk about the fact that you're my child that I sent in the future to save your life. But for Cable, he does not want to talk at all. But Cyclops does beg to just have one conversation with his son. And you have Cable say, fine. But I only want to talk about one thing. And that is, can you tell me more about my mother? And the Okay, so it's time for us to get back into our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, we are officially done covering Fatal Attractions. So now we're trying to work our way up to the next crossover, and that would be the Phalanx Covenant. Now, before we are able to dive into that crossover, of course, got to cover all the stories that lead into that crossover. So today's video, we're going to jump back over to some more X-Force comics and cover X-Force issue number 29 and issue number 30. A two-part story arc where you have Shatterstar going up against a character known as Arcade. Now, we have talked a lot about Arcade before in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men. When it comes to Arcade, he's technically a mercenary or an assassin, but he does things a tad bit different. Let me explain. You see, when it comes to Arcade, he is an assassin, but for Arcade, what he does is that he's a thing called Murder World. Now, when it comes to Murder World, it looks like an amusement park, but in reality, it's different kind of traps set up to basically be used to kill off the people that he was hired to kill. And so for Arcade, every once in a while, he'll reappear in Spider-Man comics or X-Men comics and try to kill off different members of the superhero community with his different versions of Murder World. And so this time, he's going after one character only, and that would be Shatterstar. But the question is right now, who hired Arcade to go after Shatterstar? And so as we get into the opening pages for issue number 29, we do pick up with Shatterstar being dropped off by Richter. Now, when it comes to Richter, he has to pick up some supplies for the base of X-Force. But for Shatterstar, he kind of wants to have the ability to walk around the city. Because remember, for Shatterstar, he's not from Earth. He's from Mojoverse. And so it's him saying like, listen, I kind of want to walk around so I have the chance to experience more things of this world. Now, while you have him walking around, he has no idea that he's being watched by Arcade. But like I said earlier, somebody hired Arcade to go after Shatterstar. And so right now it's Arcade saying, you know what? I want you guys, my retrieval team, to grab him, but also that family that he is currently talking to. But now we have to jump over to Camp Verde. Now, Camp Verde is the base for X-Force. Now, we pick up with Cannonball and also Boom Boom. Now, let's not forget that these two characters are dating one another. And so with them dating, it's about time for her to meet Cannonball's mother, but also his siblings as well. So these two characters are technically taking a vacation trip over to Kentucky of all places. But either way, these two characters are going to pay a visit to Cannonball's family. Now, with that being said, you do have the book remind us that Sunspot is still missing. Because remember, at the end of our last X-Force video, when it came to X-Force, they were fighting against the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, at the end of that battle, there was a huge explosion. But after the explosion, the entire team of the Mutant Liberation Front had disappeared, including Sunspot as well. And so for the last 3 weeks, our heroes have been trying their best to find their missing teammate, but unfortunately, They can't find him anywhere. And so right now, it's Cable saying, you know what? Let's take a break. Guys, go out in the world and do different things to relax. But after you have relaxed, come back together and we will continue our search for our missing team member. Now, we also get reminded that when it came to that battle against the Mutant Liberation Front, you also had Pharaoh leave the team as well because she kind of was the wild card on X-Force. And we kind of realized that she was not always completely good. Like, if somebody said, hey, Pharaoh, do you want to go around and kill some people? She'll be down with the idea to kill other people if they gave her the chance to kill other people. But either way, she had joined the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, with her joining, they also lost a member, and that was Tempo. And so we're kind of playing with the idea of the possibility that Tempo might be joining X-Force here. But for right now, she wants to be left alone on Camp Verde. But now we have to jump over to Siren, the daughter of Banshee. Now, we had learned early on when it came to X-Force comics that for Siren, she has a huge drinking problem, like a huge one. But on top of that, the reason why she does drink so much is because she literally hates herself. Now, there are a lot of reasons why she does hate herself, but we kind of get the idea that she wants to be left alone, especially when you have Warpath come around. Now, remember, when it comes to Warpath, he has a crush on her. Like, he actually does like her. But he also understands what she's going through, the whole idea of hating herself. And so for Warpath, he has been trying his best to just be there for her, to have someone in her corner. But for Siren, it's kind of like, no, I don't want anybody there for me at all. And she just walks away after using her powers on Warpath. Now, it was Cable who told Warpath to tell Siren how he truly feels about her. And so right now for Warpath, he feels like Cable gave him horrible advice. But in reality, it might have been great advice. We also do learn that for Cable, he's kind of beginning to feel like he's a tad bit lonely, but also the team needs somebody else in their corner. Somebody who's not as young, but not as old as him. And that person would be no other than Domino. Now, we get into the point where we have Arcade's retrieval team being able to get a hold of Shatterstar. And so right now, you have Shatterstar just waking up, but now he's in Murder World. Now, this book right here, we don't really see the whole idea of Murder World being an amusement park, but either way, he's inside Murder World right now. And so the games begin for Arcade trying to kill off Shatterstar. Now for Shatterstar, he is able to hold his own against the different soldiers that Arcade has brought in. But let's not forget that earlier when it came to Arcade, he saw Shatterstar talking to a family. And so right now that family was also taken as well as hostages. And so for Shatterstar, he has no choice but to go ahead and to continue to fight against the different soldiers as a way to save the lives of the family that he was just talking to earlier as he was just walking by. Now, some of these soldiers, they're from Mojoverse. These soldiers work for Mojo, so we're kind of left to believe in the possibility that somebody from Mojoverse had hired Arcade to kill off Shatterstar. But either way, you do have our young hero being able to actually save the family, but also take down all the soldiers as well. So you did have Arcade as Shatterstar to wear his old outfit, the one he wore when he first appeared in the early days of X-Force comics. Now for Shatterstar, he also learned who hired Arcade to come after him. He comes to find out it was a character known as Major Domo. Now, Major Domo is the right-hand man for, well, Mojo in the Mojoverse. And so apparently he was the one who hired Arcade to come after Shatterstar. Now, we also learned that somebody else had paid Arcade to go after another character. And so for Arcade, he realized that he can go ahead and finish both contracts with just having those two people fight against one another. And so now for Shatterstar, he has to fight against the other target that Arcade was sent after. And we kind of find out it is Adam X. Now, we have talked about Adam X before. He first appeared over in X Force Annual issue number 2. Now, in that issue alone, we had learned that Adam X is a mutant, but he does not know his actual past yet, his actual origin. Now, for Adam X, when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to learn a lot of things about him and his connections to the Summers family. And it does get a tad bit complicated because, well, it's Marvel Comics and things always get complicated. Now, with all that being said, for Adam X, he has the ability of blood burning. Now, blood burning is when you have Adam X being able to cut you and you start bleeding. But once you do start bleeding, he's then able to send a shockwave through your body by hitting all the electrolytes in your body. So it's a small shockwave, but at the same time, it feels like you are burning from the inside out. And so for Adam X, he's able to do that onto Shatterstar. Now, we also learn here again that for Adam X, the only reason why Arcade is coming after him because somebody hired Arcade to also kill off Adam X. Now, for Adam, he was told if you kill off Shatterstar, then you should be able to save the other prisoner I have. And so for Shatterstar, he wants to know who is the third prisoner. And we kind of find out her name is Windsong. Now, this was a huge moment for like one page. And let me explain why. Because we kind of find out that Windsong is the wife of Shatterstar from the Mojoverse. But sadly, before we were able to learn anything about Windsong, we gotta jump back over to Tempo and Cable for like one page to only kind of find out that Tempo is not gonna join X-Force at all. Matter of fact, it's her saying that she just wants a normal life. And because Cable did not turn her in, she has the chance now to have a normal life. And so she just drives away. And so no, Tempo will not be joining X-Force at all. But you then have Domino appear. Now, when Domino does appear, it's kind of like, okay, now we know she'll be the one to join X-Force. Now, this will be her first time joining X-Force. And let me explain. You see, in the early days of X-Force comics, we met Domino, but not the one you're seeing right now. You see, we had learned the Domino we had in the early days of X-Force comics was somebody else pretending to be Domino, a character known as Vanessa, who's very close to good old Deadpool, but also a character known as Mr. Tolliver. But we had learned that Tolliver was holding on to the real Domino and asked Vanessa to pretend to be Domino as a way to get close to Cable. And so for this Domino, the real one, it'll be her first time joining X-Force. But yes, she'll be joining the team from now on. But then we have to jump back over to Siren and also Warpath, because we now see Siren kind of realize that what Warpath said earlier was the honest truth. Like, this is a man who wants to help her out. He's scared to see her way she is. And so once she realized that she has this good guy in front of her, she's kind of like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, you and I both need a vacation as well. Won't you come back home with me? And he's all like, oh my God, she might like me back. And now she's asking me to go home with her. This is great. And so they leave to go back to her home. Now, I feel like the next storyline is going to be about Black Tom and Juggernaut fighting against Siren and also Warpath. And the reason why, because we jump over to Ireland. And when we do, we see Black Tom and Juggernaut arriving at the home of the Cassidy family. Now, remember, Cassidy is the last name for Siren, Banshee, and Black Tom. All three characters are related to one another. Now, with that being said, you have Black Tom and Juggernaut go back over to the home of the Cassidys, and we kind of find out that the family lawyer has been living inside the mansion for the time being. But for Black Tom, he wants his home back under his possession. And so he kills off the family lawyer, and now he's living inside the home of the Cassidys. But let's not forget that Siren and Warpath are going home, and that home is most likely this house right here. Now let's get back over to Shatterstar and also good old Adam X. Now we do learn very quickly here that Windsong is his wife, but not in the way that you are thinking. You see, for Shatterstar, back in the Mojoverse, he was heavily used for entertainment. He would fight in the arena. And so, with him being a warrior in the arena, they wanted more great soldiers, great warriors to fight in the arena. And they said, listen, you're going to try to produce a child with that lady right there, Winsong, so that we'll be able to have more great warriors to fight in the arena. So it's kind of like a forced marriage there. We do kind of find out that Winsong is not even there at all. Matter of fact, it's a hologram. But now you have Adam X and Shatterstar agree to work together to hunt down Arcade and get the heck out of Murder World. And really, the next few pages is our heroes just trying their best to fight their way out of Murder World, but to also find Arcade and Miss Locke, Arcade right-hand lady. And so once you have our heroes being able to fight their way through different kinds of soldiers, they do find Arcade. They find him. And they also find Miss Locke as well. But you did have Miss Locke say, if you take one more step forward, I'm going to kill off Winsong. She's right here, right now, next to me. And so we're kind of left to believe that this is the real Winsong, the wife of Shatterstar. Now, the ending of this book for me is kind of hilarious. And the reason why I'm saying that because, okay, you have Shatterstar kind of like, hey, you know what? To save the life of my wife, I'm going to go ahead and kill myself. And so he stabs himself so that his wife can live, to only find out that one, he faked his death, but two, she's not there at all. Once again, it is another hologram. But on top of that, when it comes to Arcade, he's not even there either. It is a robot. So you have our two heroes being able to take down Arcade's robot, also take out Miss Locke, but then once again become free. They're out of Murder World. And you then have our two characters go their separate ways. And that's how the book ends. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's it. So yeah, we get another appearance of Adam X, and we do get a cool storyline, but nothing really comes out of it. And when it comes to Winsong, the real version of her, we're never going to see her at all in Marvel Comics. This was her only appearance ever in Marvel Comics, but as a hologram. So yeah, guys, that's it. See you on the next comic book video. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we do pick up with X-Force issue number 31. Now, this issue right here is really more of trying to put Black Tom on the back burner, yes, but at the same time, is also trying to dive into the origin of the character known as Siren. Now, as we all know, Siren is the daughter of Banshee. But the problem was, for Banshee, he had no idea that he had a daughter. And the reason why, because, well, Black Tom, his evil cousin, did his best to keep her a secret. So for a long time there, for Banshee, he believed that he did not have a daughter. Now, I will explain more about that here in a moment, but as we get into the opening pages for today's video, it does pick up where our last video had left off at. Because in our last video, you had two different things happen. The first was that Black Tom and Juggernaut had went back over to Cassidy Keep, the home for the entire Cassidy family in Ireland. Now, when you have Black Tom knock on the door, he come to find out the family lawyer was there. And so you have Black Tom attack the lawyer. Now, I'll tell you the truth, guys. In my last video, I thought that the lawyer was dead. But then in this video, it's like, oh no, the lawyer is alive, but he's just seriously injured. That's wild. But apparently that lawyer was able to get some help. But now you have all these different forces wanting to bring Black Tom in for the crimes that he had committed. But the problem is right now, nobody knows where Black Tom is at. And that kind of leads into the second thing that happened in our last video, because in our last video, we began to learn that for Siren, she is an alcoholic, but she's trying her best to break away. But the reason why she is one because what happened in her life. Now, we saw in the last few videos that Warpath had truly cared for the girl and wanted her to get better. And so once you had Warpath confess his love to Siren, she wanted to go back home to the family home, Cassidy Keep. And so, of course, when they got back home, they got word of what had happened. The lawyer was attacked by Black Tom, her crazy cousin. And so for Warpath, he's kind of sad because now, as soon as they get back to Ireland and she thinks it's going to be a nice vacation, she hears that her crazy cousin is causing problems once again. And she went home and started drinking all over again. And so as we get into the opening pages for today's video, we do pick up with Warpath having a meeting with a character known as Kelvin. Now, when it comes to Kelvin, this dude right here was like an old friend of Siren when they were teenagers, but also had feelings for her as well and wanted to be there for everything that she has gone through. Either way, for Kelvin, he's now kind of like a detective in Ireland, trying their best to figure out where in the world Black Tom could possibly be at. Because, like I said, in our last video, you had Black Tom attack the family lawyer. Now, we do learn that the lawyer is okay, but the question is right now, why did Black Tom even attack the lawyer for? Now, for Warpath, he says, listen, the reason why he did that is most likely because he wants attention. Now, he wants the attention of everybody, but especially of one person. And of course, that would be Siren, the young girl he had raised while Banshee was away. And matter of fact, we jump over to Siren, and when we do, we see her being very upset about the fact that the garden near the Cassidy Keep has not been taken care of. It really bothers her a lot. And so the whole idea of her cousin now being back out there as somebody wanted by the law, but also seeing the way the garden was being taken care of, it just adds on to the pain that she was currently feeling. And so once again, she begins to drink so bad to the point where she passes out in the middle of the dead garden, and you have Warpath coming out of his way to take her back inside to get her cleaned up. But that leads into one of the biggest conversations between these two characters, because for Warpath it's all like, listen, I don't know the full story of what exactly happened to you between you and Black Tom that makes you hate your life, that makes you drink so much. But at the same time, you don't have a monopoly of different reasons to have grief. Because for Warpath here, this man lost his brother Thunderbird. Let's not forget that he was an X-Men for like 2 missions, and he died just like that. Then after that, for Warpath, right after or before he had joined X-Force, his entire tribe of people were just wiped out. And so for Warpath, he has nobody. Everybody has been killed off in his life. Now for Teresa, yes, she does have problems, but her problems in his mind does not line up to his problems. Like, hey, your problems are nowhere near as big as mine. So it's time for you to help me out, to help the police and the doctors to figure out where in the world your crazy cousin, Black Tom, is hiding out at. But now we pick up with Kelvin meeting up with Juggernaut. Now, for me personally, this is a great book right here just because of Juggernaut alone. Because usually when you read books about the character, it's always like he's some kind of goofball, and that's really it. He can't be a serious character. Now, occasionally, you'll have those stories where he is a serious character. Matter of fact, there was a story back in, I want to say, 2019, 2020, that was part of the Krakoa era for the X-Men, and when it came to Juggernaut, he was a very more serious character. Either way, for Juggernaut, not Nut, woo, bad idea. For Juggernaut, he does meet up with Kelvin. Now, for Kelvin, like I said, he's trying to do some detective work right now, trying to find Black Tom and, of course, arrest Black Tom. Now, this leads into the origin of the character Black Tom, but also Siren. Because we learned early on here that for Black Tom, the dude was a ladies' man. Like this dude was getting ladies left and right, except for one. And her name was Maeve. Now, when it came to Maeve, she did like Black Tom, but as a friend. Homeboy got friend zoned. Now, with him being friend zoned, he was kind of upset, but it only got worse when she fell in love with his cousin Banshee. And so, because of that, it was kind of like the hatred between these two characters began at that exact moment. Because for Black Tom, he always wondered why he was not good enough to get Maeve, the woman he truly did care for. Now, when it came to Banshee, he had to leave for some government work. And so when he left, he had no idea that his wife was pregnant. He had no idea that she gave birth to a young girl. And so when he came back, all he heard was, hey man, listen, your wife died in a tragic incident. Like she's dead. I'm sorry. And that was really it. No one told the man, like, hey, even though she died, at least you have a daughter. For Black Tom, after she had died, he took Siren in and was supposed to raise her and then tell Banshee about her. Because again, it's his kid. Now, for Banshee, he does come back home. And when he does come back home, he gets upset at Black Tom. And the reason why, because he knew back then even Black Tom was madly in love with Maeve. And so he blames Black Tom for not trying to protect the woman they both love. And so you have Banshee use his mutant ability on Black Tom, which then led to Black Tom getting his leg broken. And so it kind of explains why Black Tom has always had that cane with him. But either way, for Black Tom, he kind of took the words of Banshee to heart because, again, Black Tom was madly in love with Maeve. He should have been out there trying to watch over her, to protect her from harm. But unfortunately, he didn't do that. So she died. And then, of course, now Teresa has no mother. Now, again, he could have told Banshee that, hey, listen, you have a daughter. But because you have Banshee get so mad at Black Tom, attacked Black Tom, and left, right after he left, you have Banshee go do some more government work and stay away from Cassidy Keep for many years. And so because of that, Black Tom supposedly never had the chance to tell Banshee about his daughter Teresa. Now, when it came to Black Tom, he began to fall into some illegal work. At that point, he had sent Teresa away to go be at boarding school so that she will be part of his life somewhat, but not when he's out there doing some illegal activities. But now I want to jump back over to Warpath and also Siren. Now, when we do, it's really more of Siren trying to explain why she became an alcoholic. And the reason why, because the whole idea of Black Tom kind of abandoning her, but not really. Because, like I said, for Black Tom, he sent her away as a way to protect her. You know, he's all like, hey, go to boarding school to stay away from me, but to also get an education, but at the same time, we still have some kind of communication with one another. But in reality, he hated the idea of having her around while being some kind of criminal. But for Teresa, she didn't see it like that. Her mom died when she was barely born. Her dad is supposedly dead or just not around. And then Black Tom is all like, hey, listen, go to boarding school and stay over there away from me. She felt like she was abandoned. And so when she got to boarding school, she fell into the wrong crowd. And that crowd of people, they had liquor. They gave her liquor. Next thing you know, she slowly became an alcoholic. And then after a couple years or maybe months, she then finds out that her uncle or her protector, guardian, Black Tom, has been arrested and gone for 5 years to prison. And she never saw him in prison. And so once again, she kind of felt like that she was abandoned. Now, in a very kind of unfortunate way, she kind of believes that it's her fault the way Black Tom is, or it's her fault that Black Tom went to prison, because in her mind, really in my mind, it's kind of like she reminds him of the woman that he used to love, the woman he lost to Banshee, the child that he could have been the father too. But either way, once into jail, she began to blame herself. Now, for Warpath, he tells her, you can't do that to yourself, though. It's not your fault for his mistakes. It was him who got locked up. It was him who kept the secret between you and your father. Like, it was all his fault, not yours. But now we have to jump over to Kelvin. Now, when we do, it's really more of Kelvin right now still trying to do some detective work, trying to figure out where in the world Black Tom could possibly be at. Now, for Kelvin, he does get a fax, and that fax came from a laboratory in France. Now, this lab is really important for the character of Black Tom, and let me explain. So, for Black Tom, he was shot by Cable in the early days of X-Force Comics. He was supposed to die, but the thing was, he was saved at the very last second by Deadpool. And when it came to Deadpool, he took Black Tom over to that lab in France to get some medical help, but at the same time, that lab was going to give Black Tom an upgrade, possibly giving him a new set of powers. Now, the problem was, while they were trying to work on Black Tom, you had the Juggernaut come out of his way to break his old friend out. The problem was, because the whole project was not done yet, it kind of led to the fact that Black Tom's body and mind was not properly healed up, but also not ready to go back out into the real world. And so the fact saying right now, Black Tom is going to die. His body and mind is slowly dying off. And so sooner or later, he's going to need some medical help if he wants to survive. And so for Kelvin, he realized that he can use this as a way to bring Black Tom out and finally arrest him. And so you have Warpath go meet up with Juggernaut. Now, when he does, it's really more of Warpath telling Juggernaut, like, hey, listen, I got some info that your friend is basically dying. Like, the lab that you had broke him out of was not able to finish their work on him. And so his mind and body is currently dying. And so if you want to save the man's life, the same guy you look at as a brother, you're going to have to go ahead and hand him over. And yes, SHIELD wants him. Interpol wants him. FBI wants him. So many different groups want him. They're all saying that they'll cut him a deal, but at the same time, try to cure him as well. And so for Juggernaut, he kind of realized that he has no choice here because his friend, the guy he looks at as a brother, is dying. He's literally dying. He says, you know what? Fine. Where can we meet up at? Because I want him to get the help. And honestly, if he's able to get that help, sooner or later, I will be able to break him out of prison and we'll be together again. And so you have Juggernaut agree to hand Black Tom over and meet at a certain place. So you have Black Tom being able to meet up with Teresa, Siren. Now, when the two characters do meet up, it's really more of Teresa letting Black Tom know how she truly feels. Because for Black Tom, he's blaming everybody else for all the things that went wrong in his life, but he's not blaming himself. It's all like, it's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. But in reality, almost everything that has happened is his fault. And the problem is, he knows it is his fault, but he hates the idea of admitting that everything happening to him, to Teresa, to Sean, to Maeve, was all his fault. And so it's Teresa saying, like, you could have made things better for everybody if you had just told my father the truth. The whole idea that he was a father, that I was around. If you had told me the truth, again, I could have been with my father. And it's also her saying, like, I kind of realized that you were afraid of losing me, but you didn't realize I had enough love for my father and also for you if you had told me the truth. And so Black Tom kind of realized that, yeah, everything that happened in his life is his own fault. And so you have the book really end with him being arrested and being taken away to hopefully get cured, but to, be put on the back burner for the time being. But yeah, this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, right? And so we're going to pick up with some good old X-Force, but actually a crossover with X-Force and also New Warriors. You see, in the 1990s, for the X-Men, they had crossover a lot with some other titles like Spider-Man, New Warriors, and the list goes on. And so for X-Force, it's kind of like, hey, here is another crossover, but at the same time, we're still continuing the whole big storyline involving the Upstart organization. Now, we have talked about the Upstart organization before, but just real quick, here's a quick reminder of who they are. The Upstart organization is a group of people who go out of their way to kill off other mutants. And the reason why, because they receive points in their organization when they kill off mutants. And matter of fact, the more points you get, the higher you are in the rankings. Now, if you kill off a more powerful mutant, then you receive a whole lot more points than usual. Now, the leader of the entire organization is a character known as Game Master. He makes the rules, and he's the one that says, hey guys, here are your new targets if you want to receive more points when it comes to the organization. And so he's the man in charge. Now, for Game Master, he's also a omnipath, meaning that his mind is connected to all the minds across the world. He knows what everyone is feeling and also thinking as well. Now, the Upstart organization is going to play a major role in the storyline. Well, they are the main bad guys of this book, so they should play a major role in this storyline. But getting into X-Force issue number 32 as the first chapter for today's video, we do pick up in Nova Roma. Now, Nova Roma is a small country out in South America. Now, here's the catch. They have believed for a very long time that they were a colony of the Roman Empire. And so they were kind of living like ancient Rome people did back in the day, not knowing that, well, their minds have been played with by a character known as Selene. And so thanks to some characters, they were able to find out the actual truth of their origin, that you're not part of the Roman Empire at all. And matter of fact, that's been gone for a very long time. And so right now you have the people of Nova Roma trying to move on from the day they were believing they were part of the Roman Empire. Now, the reason why we're going over to Nova Roma is because of a character known as Magma. Now, for Magma, she has been around for a good while. Matter of fact, she was part of the New Mutants in the early days and also part of the Hellions as well. Now, after leaving both teams, she went back home to Nova Roma. Now, like I said, the people out there believed that they were part of the Roman Empire, but you didn't have the people find out that that's not true at all. And matter of fact, you had all these different people begin to learn their true origins, like Magma did. She began to learn that she's probably from Great Britain. Now, with that being said, she's still out there in Nova Roma trying to relearn how to use her powers, but also kind of wondering what is the next move for her life and the people of Nova Roma as well, as they try to go back to the old lives they had before coming to this country. Now, while you have Magma trying to relearn how to use her powers, that is when she is attacked by the Von Strucker twins. Now, we have talked about them before. They're just two characters who are also mutants, but they can only use their ability when they hold hands with one another. Now, with that being said, they're also part of the Upstart organization. So they came here to capture Magma. Now, usually, if you're part of the Upstart organization and if you're going after somebody for points, you go ahead and kill off that person. But this time, things are being done differently. You see, for the Von Strucker twins, they have to capture Magma first and then bring her over to Game Master. And so we see the two characters being able to depower Magma and officially capture her. But before they're able to leave with her, you have the different Upstart agents who are there with them to help capture Magma begin to attack the Von Strucker twins. And the reason why, because they're being controlled by a character known as Empath. You see, when it came to Magma coming back home, she brought home a friend, somebody who was beginning to fall in love with her. And that'll be the character known as Empath, who has the ability to control other people's emotions. And so you have Empath thinking that he should be able to control the emotions of the different agents who came along with the Von Strucker twins to attack the Von Strucker twins to give him enough time to hopefully save Magma. But unfortunately, he was not able to pull the plan off. And so he has no choice but to go ahead and retreat and hopefully get away from the Von Strucker twins. But now we have to jump over to the Hellfire Club. Now, the Hellfire Club has been gone for a good while in our coverage over the X-Men for a lot of reasons, but the main ones because you had Shinobi Shaw, the son of Sebastian Shaw, kill off his own father and kind of did destroy the whole idea of the Hellfire Club. Now, for Shinobi, when he had killed off his father, he had received a lot of points for the Upstart organization. So technically right now, he's at the very top. But he was the one that brought back the Hellfire Club. Now, there is an issue we had skipped over that kind of showed the return of the Hellfire Club. And don't worry, we're going to cover it, but it takes place right at the same time as this storyline was coming out as well. And so unfortunately, we're going to skip that book for now and come back to it later on. Now, when it comes to Shinobi Shaw, like I said, he brought back the Hellfire Club, but he also invited two members of the New Warriors. And that would be two characters known as Justice and also Night Thrasher. Now, these two characters came here for different reasons. You see, for Night Thrasher, who's also part of the New Warriors, he was invited here because the dude has money, and Shinobi Shaw only invited people who got that money. Now, for Justice, he went undercover as a way to get close to Shinobi Shaw, to kind of learn more about what he's actually up to. Now, for Justice, he was able to learn that for Shinobi Shaw and the rest of the Upstart organization, they're going after the surviving members of the Hellions, because most of the team was killed off in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men. But it's not just the Hellions, they're also going after the people who were part of the New Mutants as well. And matter of fact, we got to jump over to X-Force because two people who were part of the New Mutants have been kidnapped. And that would be Cannonball and also Boom Boom. You see, in the 1990s, you had those two characters go over to Kentucky to spend some time with Cannonball's mother. And the reason why, because Cannonball and Boom Boom were a couple in the early mid-1990s. So it got to a point where it was time for her to meet his mother. But the problem was, while being out there, they were attacked by a different member of the Upstart organization. And that would be Sienna Blaze. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to re-explain everything about this character. Just know that for Sienna Blaze, she is the newest member to the Upstart organization, and she already failed twice when it came to getting points in the Upstart organization. She went after the leaders of the X-Men, Storm, Cyclops, and Charles Xavier, and she had failed there, and she went after Moira McTaggart, but being stopped by Excalibur. But this time, she came after Cannonball and also Boom Boom. Now, like I said earlier, for all these different members of the New Mutants and Hellions, they're not being killed off right at the start of battle. They're being knocked out and taken away because they're going to be killed off later on. And so when Sienna Blaze had arrived there, she had knocked out Cannonball, knocked out Boom Boom, and took them away. But she had no idea that she was being watched by a sibling of Cannonball, and that would be Paige. And so Paige ran home, told her mom, they called up X-Force, and now X-Force is wondering what in the world happened to their two teammates. Now, for Cable, he said, listen, we had used our sensors, and unfortunately, we can't find them anywhere across the world at all. And that could mean one or three things. One, they're possibly dead. Two, they're off-world. Or three, somebody is trying to cloak them. But either way, Cannonball and also Boom Boom have been officially kidnapped. But now we have to jump over to Game Master. Now, when we do, we see that it is Game Master right now using his mind as a way to cloak both Cannonball and Boom Boom so that nobody will be able to find them. Now, with that being said, we also see him calling in another meeting with the different members of the Upstart organization. Now, for this meeting, is really him saying, like, hey, listen, here's your new goals right now. I need you guys to go out there and hunt down the different mutants who were part of the New Mutants, but also part of the Hellions as well, and bring them back over to me. Don't kill them, just bring them back over to me. Now, we do see that some of the older members of the Upstart organization is beginning to kind of hate on Game Master. And the reason why, because he was kind of only brought in to be a referee for the whole entire organization. But as time has changed, he began to become more of the actual leader of the entire organization and kind of bossing them around. And they don't like that. But either way, they do now have their new assignment to go after the New Mutants and after the Hellions as well and bring them back over to him. But now we have to jump over to Empath. Now, when we do, we see that Empath is still trying to run away from the Von Strucker twins. The problem is he runs over to a crowd of people who were trying to leave the life behind of being part of Nova Roma and trying to transition back into their old lives again. Except when they turn around, they see that Empath is being followed and being attacked. And by the time they realize what's happening to him, some of them get killed off by the Von Strucker twins. Now, it does kind of look like that Empath is going to get captured by the Von Strucker twins. But luckily for him, somebody else arrives, and that would be Moonstar. Now remember, Danny Moonstar, for some strange reason, had joined the Mutant Liberation Front, and we have not been told why just yet. But either way, she does arrive just in time to save the life of Empath. Now, for a brief moment, I want to jump back over to Cable. And the reason why, because you have Cable talking to the mother of Cannonball, Sam Guthrie. Now, here's the thing. His father died a long time ago, and he has a lot of siblings. So it's just his mom trying her best to take care of all of her kids. Now, she hated the idea of Sam leaving, joining the New Mutants, but also being part of some kind of mutant war, as she calls it. Now, for her, she's also hating the idea of the possibility that she might lose another child, and that would be Paige. Paige might also be leaving her home soon to go be part of this mutant war, because Paige is also a mutant. And matter of fact, she does leave the home and become a member of the X-Men known as Husk. But right now it's kind of like building up to the idea of her possibly leaving and might be joining X-Force down the road. But then you have Cable get called away. And the reason why, because Domino and the rest of X-Force with him and her are being confronted by Fitzroy, another member of the Upstart organization. And he's there to, well, kill off X-Force, but to also grab Warpath and grab Richter as well, because those two characters were part of the Hellions and the New Mutants. But we have to jump over to Shinobi Shaw because, like I said earlier, for Shinobi Shaw, he has no idea that Justice, who's part of the New Warriors, is really undercover to get close to him to kind of learn what the Upstart organization is up to. And so for Justice, he got his assignment from Shinobi Shaw to go after somebody that he cares a whole lot for, and that would be Firestar, Justice's girlfriend, but also somebody who was part of the Hellions in the past. And so Shinobi saying, hey, listen, I know you love her and all, but I need you to bring her over to me. It's the only way to protect her, but to also help me out as well. And so you have Justice leave to go back over to the New Warriors to hopefully grab Firestar. Now we have to jump over to New Warriors issue number 45. Now, for this issue, we do pick up with the three people who have been captured so far by the different members of the Upstart organization. So, like Boom Boom, Cannonball, and also Magma as well. Now, you do have Game Master going out of his way to explain what he's actually up to. Like, hey, you know what? I kidnapped you three guys to bring y'all over here because y'all are my latest targets. You and the rest of the New Mutants are out there, but also the rest of the Hellions as well. And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering, what in the world is this Game Master character thinking of? Because for Cannonball and also Boom Boom, they have not really had the chance to be confronted by the members of the upstart organization like the other teams out there have so far. And so for Cannonball and Boom Boom and even Magma, this is all new to them. But now we have to jump over to the New Warriors. Now, when it comes to the New Warriors, they're kind of expressing the fact that they're very upset with their leader, Night Thrasher. And the reason why, because he did not tell the rest of the team that Justice has gone undercover as a way to get close to Shinobi Shaw. You see, for Shinobi Shaw, they had learned that he was helping out the Friends of Humanity. And that group right there, their main goal is to kill off the mutant race. But it made no sense for Shinobi Shaw to be working with that kind of group at all. But with that being said, with Justice being undercover, he was able to get close enough to figure out that the upstart organization is going after the different members of the New Mutants and the different members of the Hellions as well. Now, something else I should also mention is that when it comes to Shinobi Shaw, he had the ability to blackmail Justice to have Justice work for him. But either way, it's Night Thrasher now saying like, look, now we know that sooner or later they're coming after you, Firestar, because you were a member of the Hellions, which means that we have to be on our A game. Now, this section is also being used as a way to say like the entire team's getting new outfits. And the reason why I'm saying that because you have Speedball being very upset about the idea the rest of the team got brand new outfits except for him, and then out of nowhere his powers give him a newer outfit. It was so random, but like at the same time I still had to just go ahead and mention it. But while you have the New Warriors talking to one another, they're then confronted by Tribunal. Now, Tribunal is actually Graydon Creed, the son of Mystique and also Sabretooth, who also is part of the Upstart organization. So, of course, he's there to go get Firestar. But now we have to transition over to Moonstar and also Empath. Now they had left Nova Roma and they had went over to Madripoor. And while being there, their main goal is to hopefully find Karma, another member of the New Mutants who has been there for a good while actually. But while there, they're then confronted by Sienna Blaze. Now, again, is Sienna Blaze just coming after different people who are part of the New Mutants and the Hellions? Now, at first, it did look like we're going to have a battle between her and Moonstar and also Empath. But we don't, because you do have Karma being able to take over her mind to shut her down. So our three heroes are able to continue on with their game plan, which, matter of fact, we have no idea what that game plan is just yet. It kind of seems like just go around collecting different members of the New Mutants and also the Hellions as well. But now we can jump back over to the New Warriors. Now, when we do, we see the New Warriors fighting against the different members of Graydon Creed's army. Because again, he's Tribunal, but he brought other guys along with him to fight against the New Warriors to hopefully capture Firestar. Either way, you do have our heroes being able to bring down the entire group. Now, at the end of the section, you didn't have Justice appear. Now, for Firestar, she's very happy to see the man that she loves, but at the same time, she's still mad at him because, again, he went undercover and no one told her nor the rest of the team that he'll be going undercover to work very close to Shinobi Shaw. Now, for Justice, he tells Firestar the only way to kind of get closer to Shinobi and also the Upstart organization's plan is to go ahead and sacrifice the life of Firestar. Now, not technically give up her life, but it kind of seems like if he does hand her over to Shinobi Shaw in the Upstart organization, then she's going to die. But in reality, he'll try his best to do whatever he can to protect the woman that he loves. Now, with all that being said, you then have Justice bring Firestar over to Shinobi Shaw. Now, for Shinobi, he believes that his room is so protected that when it comes to Game Master, he should not be able to listen in on his conversation with him and also Justice. But in reality, Game Master can still hear everything going on, kind of seeing that for Shinobi Shaw, he has something up his sleeve. Now, before Game Master is kind of able to continue on to listen in, he's then confronted by Sienna Blaze. Now, when it comes to Sienna Blaze, she was able to capture Karma, Moonstar, and also Empath. Now, for Sienna Blaze here, she's technically in the lead because now she was able to capture at least 5 mutants. Now, Game Master told everyone earlier, if you just capture them, I'll give you points as well. Points like you actually had killed them off. And so for Sienna Blaze here, even though she only captured them, they're being counted as 5 kills at the moment. But either way, it's kind of confusing because we saw earlier that Karma took her down, but apparently something happened where you had Karma lose and also Moonstar and, well, Empath. And so with all 3 characters, including Cannonball, Magma, and also Boom Boom, that's now 6 characters with Game Master being his hostages. And so now we have to dive into the 3rd chapter. Now, when we do, we pick up with X-Force taking on Fitzroy. Now, for Fitzroy, he truly believes that he has the chance to take down X-Force on his own. Guys, that is a huge mistake. And here's the reason why. Because for Fitzroy, he has this sidekick known as Bentam. And I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Bentam, he's a sidekick of Fitzroy, but like a weak sidekick, where when it comes to anybody having a conversation with him, he's always scared of the other person. And so for Warpath, not Thunderbird, you have Warpath being able to scare Bentam just good enough to get all the info he needed about Fitzroy and how to bring him down. Now, when it comes to Fitzroy, he has the ability to open up portals, but there is a catch. To allow himself to open up a portal, he has to drain people's life energy or his own life energy to open up portals. And so for Cable, he knows that this is a perfect game plan to figure out where possibility the rest of the X-Force team is at, the ones who got captured, Cannonball and also Boom Boom. And so you had Cable kind of fake his arm to look like a regular human being arm. And the reason why, because for Cable, let's not forget that half of his body is techno-organic. It's not human flesh. And so when it comes to Fitzroy, when he tries to grab Cable's metal arm, he believes at first that he is grabbing a human flesh arm, but in reality, he's grabbing a techno-organic arm. And so unfortunately for Fitzroy, he's not able to absorb the life energy of Cable. But because Fitzroy did activate his powers have no choice but to go ahead and absorb his own life energy. And so when he does that, he does open up a portal. And so you have X-Force take that portal, hoping that it could possibly lead them back to the rest of their team that have been captured so far. Now, right after you have X-Force leave, you didn't have Paige, the sister to Sam, wanting to also leave as well because she wants to use her mutant abilities as a way to help out the mutant race, to help out her brother. Now, for her mother, she's all like, please don't go, stay here. Already lost 1 child to this war. But for Paige, she believes she has to go as well. Now, something I want to mention for Paige is that she does not truly know what her power is just yet. She believes that she is a mutant because her brother is one. And honestly, she is a mutant, but she has no idea what that power is. And unfortunately for us, we're not going to find out for a good while here, it seems like. Now, let's jump back over to Justice, who's still pretending to work for Shinobi Shaw, who's also trying to portray Game Master. But for Justice, he's also trying to portray Shinobi Shaw. There's a whole lot of portrayal here. But either way, once you have Justice bring Firestar over to the home of Game Master, you have Game Master tell Justice that he knows that he was planning on trying to portray Shinobi, who was also trying to portray him. And And so you have Game Master say, if you are Shinobi try to come after me, I'm gonna tell you right now, attack on me is attack on your friends because their minds and bodies are now connected to me. And we see all the different people that have been captured so far have now been hooked to some kind of machine that is connected to Game Master. But now we have to jump over to the new warriors. Now, when we do, we see the new warriors going over to the base that belongs to Graydon Creed. Now, earlier I had said that Graydon Creed was there at the base of the new warriors fighting against him. And that was not true at all. It was actually his guards who were there. Instead, he stayed behind. But you have the new warriors going over to his base now to say, like, hey, listen, your guards, your agents, they had failed when it comes to fighting against us. But now we are here to ask you some questions like, hey, where in the world is our friends at? We know that you have some info on where in the world you have our friends being held at. Now, for Graydon Creed, at first, he's not trying to give any kind of information at all until you have the new warriors go out of their way to blackmail him and say, listen, you're part of the Friends of Humanity, and they hate mutants. Their main goal is to kill off the mutant race. But here's the big catch, though. You see, you're also working with the Upstart organization, a group of mutants. What would happen if the Friends of Humanity finds out that you are working for or helping a group of mutants out? And so just like that, he begins to give the new warriors all the info they need or all the info he has on him. But getting back over to X-Force, they were able to use the portal that Fitzroy had made to go over to the home of Shinobi Shaw. Now, for Shinobi Shaw, he feels like that our hero should not be able to attack him at all thanks to his mutant ability. But unfortunately for him, Domino has the right weapons to bring him down if she wants to. And so he has no choice but to go ahead and share the location of where Game Master and all their friends being held at. And so just like that, he gives them that info as well. So you now have both teams begin to head over to the home of Game Master, the New Warriors, and also X-Force. Now, I want to jump back over to Karma. Here's the reason why. Okay, so earlier we saw that Karma was able to knock out Sienna Blaze and was able to save the lives of both Empath and also Moonstar. But then we kind of find out that wasn't completely true because we then saw Sienna Blaze hand over Karma, Empath, and Moonstar over to Game Master. But here comes the big catch. We kind of find out that the entire time it was Karma in control of the mind of Sienna Blaze as a way to get close to the Upstart organization and also Game Master. And so she wakes up and wakes up the other people who are all hooked up to the machine earlier that's hooked up to Game Master. Now, once you have everybody woken up, you then have everybody try to go to the nearby door to get the heck out of there. But then they're confronted by Sienna Blaze. And you have Sienna say, I actually tricked you, Karma. I made you believe that you had control over me. But in reality, I allowed you to take over me so that I could then hand you over to the boss, which is Game Master. And so you didn't have Sienna Blaze knock out every single member of the entire hostages. And then you have Game Master say, I'm going to use you guys as a way to fight against the people who are coming here to save your lives. And this leads into the final chapter. And so now we have to jump into New Warriors issue number 46. Now, when we do, we pick up with both teams arriving to the base of Game Master. Now, this is a rare time when it comes to Marvel Comics. What I mean by that statement is that usually when you have two teams just crossing over, they always got to fight against one another and then kind of realize on the same side and then work together to bring down the enemy. Except this time you have both parties arrive and be like, hey, So you're here to bring down Game Master to save your friends like we are. Okay, cool. You know what? Let's go ahead and work together and attack the base right now. Now, here's the problem though, because for our heroes, they know that Game Master had most likely already read their thoughts and kind of know their entire game plan. But either way, you do have our heroes go out of their way to save their friends. Now, for our heroes, they were correct because when it comes to Game Master, he knew they were coming. And so what he did was he took over the minds of the different people that he had captured earlier and began to use them against the heroes who came there to save their friends. And so now you have both sides fighting against one another, and each side is losing people left and right. Now, no one is officially dying, but either way, you have folks getting seriously hurt. Now, there was one person who had tagged along, and Cable had no idea she did tag along, and that would be Paige Guthrie, the sister to Cannonball. No one had idea that she had tagged along. Now, when it comes to Paige, we kind of do learn that she has the ability to shed her skin, but we get a better idea of her powers later on in X-Men comics and later coverage videos we're going to do down the road. But either way, when it comes to Paige, she finds her brother and he's knocked out, and she's kind of wondering how seriously injured he could possibly be. And so she calls out the Game Master, hoping that she can make some kind of deal with him to have a way to stop him. Now, for Paige, she realized what she can do to bring down Game Master. And honestly, for me, this was a smart plan because she realized that for Game Master, he loves playing games. And so, what can you do to bring down somebody who loves playing games? Well, give him a new idea of a new game coming soon that he could play so that he'll get tired of playing the old game. And so you have Paige say, hey, listen, Game Master, here comes a new generation of mutants coming into the world. Young mutants like me who are learning about their abilities, but also wondering what to do with their abilities. And so she's saying there are going to be people out there who are going to try to recruit these young mutants over to their side. And matter of fact, you could be one of those people. You're playing a game against other people who are trying to recruit the new generation of mutants coming into the world. It's kind of like playing chess with the new generation of mutants. And so for Game Master, he loves the idea so much. And so he lets go of everybody that he had captured earlier and said, I'll see you in like 3, 4, 5 years because, again, you, Paige, are part of the next generation of mutants coming into the world. And sooner or later, you and those other mutants are going to run into me and the other people out there who are going to try to recruit you and the other ones popping up left and right. And then he leaves. Now, the story kind of ends on a quick, fast note where you now have both the new Warriors, but also the X-Force team kind of wondering, was Paige move was the right move to make? Because now you are talking about the idea of the possibility of Game Master coming back down the road to get revenge against our heroes, or really coming back down the road to bring in a new world of evil new mutants to use against good mutants in future battles. But either way, the teens do relax. Now, we also come to find out the Von Strucker twins have been arrested and detained by X Factor. But yeah, when Okay, so it's time for us to get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And so it's time for us to jump back over to some good old X-Force comics. And honestly, it has been a while when it came to us covering X-Force, but hey, we're back into it. Now, we're going to cover issues number 34, 35, and 36. Now, this is not really a three-part story arc. Really, the big story arc takes place in the last two issues we're going to cover, but I don't want to skip any books at all when it comes to X-Force comics. But I'm going to tell you right now, the last two chapters are all about Nimrod. You heard that right. Nimrod has returned in X-Force comics. But first, we got to cover issue number 34. And so, as we get into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with some members of X Force having a conversation with Danny Moonstar. Because remember, some members of X Force, they were part of the New Mutant team, the series that took place right before this one came out, X Force. But also, Danny Moonstar was also part of that team, but she had left the team to go stay in Asgard at the very end of that series. But then, out of nowhere, she had reappeared, but now working for the Mutant Liberation Front, a terrorist group. And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering, why in the world did she join the other side for? What in the world is going on here? Now, when she does take off her mask, they were kind of hoping in the possibility that maybe her face is scarred. If her face is scarred, then maybe that means she had gone through some kind of dramatic change. But the problem is she looks particularly normal. And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering, okay, why in the world did you join a terrorist group? But she says, I cannot tell you at the moment, but just know I do have some good reasoning behind me joining the Mutant Liberation Front. And then she leaves. But right after she does leave, you didn't have Shatterstar walk up to Richter. And the reason why, because while watching some TV, he saw something very important for Richter to know about, something about his family. And so you have those two characters walk away. But before we are able to learn what's going on with Richter and his family, we jump over to Cable and Domino, who are having a conversation with Paige Guthrie, the younger sister to Cannonball. Now, in our last video, which was Child's Play for X-Force and New Warriors, we have learned that Paige is most likely a mutant. Now, here's the thing. With her being a mutant, she's trying to find her place in the world. Now, for Cable, it's kind of like, I can't train you. I can't be there in your corner because what kind of team we are. But for Paige, it's not really her saying like, hey, I want your help, Cable, but it's also her saying like, I don't want to go back home to the family farm. I want to be out there making a change in the world. It's her saying that she'd rather be with Charles Xavier to be trained by him as an X-Men to help change the world for the betterment of mutants and humans as well. Now, to transition over to Richter and Shatterstar, we do learn that for Shatterstar, he saw a news report about Richter's uncle and also his cousin. They were shot by the police, and the reason why, because, well, they were trying to get away from the police, and so they got shot because they had committed a crime. Either way, for Richter, this begins our journey in learning about the family history of Richter, because for the longest time, all we knew about his family was his father. Because at first, for Richter, he believed that his father was killed off by Cable, but in reality, it was actually Strife. But either way, for Richter, we do learn here that his father was a big-time arms dealer in different countries across the world, especially the ones that have Latin culture. And so for Richter, he's kind of like, okay, this means I have to go back home to see my family, but to also check in on my uncle and my cousin as well. It's about time for me to finally see the rest of my family I have not seen in a very long time. I want to jump over to Magma and also Empath as well. Here's the reason why, because for Magma, she was part of the New Mutants as well, but she left the team to go back to her home country, which was Nova Roma. Now, Nova Roma is a country full of people who had believed that they were part of the Roman Empire. But here comes the big catch. You see, it was Selene, a different character, who had put a spell on the people to make them believe that they were part of the Roman Empire. And so for Magma, she had discovered that she was not even from there at all. That matter of fact, her family is back in Great Britain. But here comes the big catch. You see, for Empath, he was the first one to discover the actual truth. But he loved the idea that he was happy out there. And so what he did was he used his power as a way to keep the people into believing they were still part of the Roman Empire, but in reality, they weren't. But after a while, for Magma, she had discovered the truth. She also discovered that Empath was using his powers to play with their minds. And so that kind of hurt their relationship because these two characters were falling in love with one another. But you have Magma saying, I'm leaving because I want to find my real family. But now we have to jump back over to Richter, Cable, and Domino. And you have those three characters go over to the home country of Richter. Now, for Cable and Domino, they got to stay back because, again, for Richter's family, they believe it was Cable who had killed off Richter's father. They don't know the truth just yet. But for Richter, it's more of, okay, maybe, just maybe, I am able to rebuild that bond with my family. And that would be really great. But here comes the big problem because one of the cousins of Richter, they go outside and they see Cable. And all they know is that Cable was the one who killed off Richter's father. Now, we do get a flashback here. And we do learn again that for Richter's father, he was a guns dealer. But apparently he had some weapons for Strife. But Strife took too long to pick up those weapons. And so for Richter's father, he had no choice. He had to move the weapons away. And for Strife, that was not okay at all. And so he had killed off Richter's father. But again, he looked just like Cable. And so for Richter, he's kind of like, hey guys, stop. Is a big, huge misunderstanding. Like Cable was not the man who killed off my father. It was somebody else. Now, honestly, these folks have no idea what in the world he's even talking about. But either way, you have Richter realize that maybe, just maybe, he's better off staying away from his family because the drugs, the guns, and other illegal things they are possibly doing. And so for Richter, he goes back home. And that ends the first chapter. And so now we're able to get into the Nimrod storyline. But as we get into issue number 35, we do pick up with Domino and also Shatterstar. Now you have these two characters currently trying to break into a building that belonged to Strong Enterprises. Now we have talked about that company before, but honestly, we don't need a quick rundown who they are. Just know that this company is currently creating a special intellect chip. But here comes the big problem though. You see, this chip is so advanced, it's ahead of its time. And that was very concerning for X-Force. And so you had Cable send in Domino and also Shatterstar to be able to get that chip. But now we jump over to Richter and also Warpath. Now you have these two characters currently following a doctor who's also containing some information about that intellect chip. Now while you have our two heroes following him, you have Richter being able to use his powers to make the guy's car get a flat tire. And so then they can pretend to be people who are there to help him change his tire. And so while you have Warpath trying to change his tire, you didn't have Richter being able to get pictures of every important information that was in the scientist's briefcase. And then they leave just like that. And so with both teams being able to complete their jobs, we now pick up with Cable meeting up with Forge. And this is Cable saying, hey Forge, listen, I need your help. I need to know what's happening on the inside when it comes to the government. Because to Cable, he says, listen, I believe that they are currently working on a robot that becomes self-aware. Now Forge, he does not really believe in Cable until you have Cable show Forge the intellect chip. Now hold on real quick. Remember, for Forge, he's part of X Factor. He's the liaison. They work for the government. And that's why for Cable, he wants Forge to hopefully collect information from the inside of the government. But once you have Cable show Forge this intellect chip, is Forge freaking out because with his powers, he can tell this chip is so advanced. It is so ahead of its time. It is so concerning. And for Cable, it's him saying, when it comes to the American government, they're no longer trying to protect themselves from the mutant race. They're now trying to find ways to kill off the mutant race. And so we jump over to Banshee and also his daughter Siren. Now, for the guys out there who have been asking me to cover Generation X, don't worry. It's coming very soon. Like, guys, it's around the corner. But we pick up with Banshee with his daughter, Siren. Now, we did a video when it came to the origin of Siren that kind of explained her relationship with her father. And so at this exact moment, it's these two characters trying to rebuild their bond with one another. But it's also Banshee telling her, like, hey, listen, Charles Xavier had officially taken over Emma Frost School, her old academy. And it seems like I'll be left in charge of the academy. And so this is just another hint of we're getting that other X book very soon that you guys have been asking me for. And we do get another hint of the idea of another X book coming very soon because we jump over to Cannonball and also Paige, where you have Cannonball trying to tell Paige that she does not understand what the world is like for mutants, but also what it's like being out there as an X-Men or X-Force or X-Factor, one of the X teams. But for Paige, she still believes that she should be out there to be able to make a difference in the world. But again, she wants to be trained by Charles Xavier. But you have Cannonball say, well, the problem is right now Charles no longer has a school. But Paige say, hey, newsflash, why do you think he no longer has a school? Because nobody has signed up for classes. Again, this begins the process of another X book coming soon. But now we have to jump over to Camp Verde. Now, Camp Verde is the base for X-Force, but this is X-Force kind of sitting down and having Cable explain who Nimrod is. Now, real quick, this is a new Nimrod. Let me explain why. Because there was a different Nimrod that appeared back in Uncanny X-Men number 246. But that Nimrod came from a different future. But after a while, it was able to combine with Master Mold, but both robots went through the Siege Perilous. Now remember, the Siege Perilous is a very special item that has the ability to give you a new life somewhere else in the world. But you may or may not remember everything from your previous life. Now, we have no idea what happened to that Nimrod and also Master Mold because that will be a later story. But this Nimrod is being created by this whole new group of scientists. So it's a completely different Nimrod, but also still very dangerous as the original one because this Nimrod can almost do everything the other one could possibly do. And so as Kate was saying, if we don't go out there right now and get rid of that Nimrod, you're going to have a bunch of mutants dying across the board sooner or later. And that will be a huge problem. So you have the entire X-Force team agree to work together to bring down that Nimrod. And so now we pick up hours later and you pick up with X-Force getting their butt whooped by this Nimrod. And the reason why, because this Nimrod, as soon as they arrived at the new base that was creating this Nimrod, it was able to activate itself. And that is a huge problem because the scientists working there, they can't believe that this Nimrod was able to turn itself on. But you had this Nimrod say, well, you did put in my programs to be self-aware, to adapt and grow. And so I realized the best way to protect humankind is to go ahead and kill off the mutant race. And so, of course, when X-Force arrived, it was down to kill off X-Force as soon as it had detected our heroes. And so now it's our heroes having no choice but to fight against a Nimrod that could be almost as powerful as the original one. And so as we get into the final chapter, it's really more of X-Force just fighting against this new Nimrod. Now, while you have X-Force fighting against this new Nimrod, you also have one of the scientists realize that the programming that she had put into this new Nimrod is not working. But you have Nimrod tell her like, oh, well, you see, I was able to override your programming to install my own programming, and that's what I'm working out of right now. But you also had this Nimrod showing her like, hey, listen, I was also able to create my own kind of weapons that you had no part of. And so it kind of shows when you play this dangerous game with AI, this dangerous game with a whole self-aware robot, you get a Nimrod that becomes this dangerous. And so right now it's our heroes trying their best to just survive. Now currently it's only like a few members of X-Force, but they're getting their butt kicked. And you do have other members of X-Force try to jump into the battle to help out. But the problem is every single time they're kind of able to do some kind of damage to this Nimrod, is able to repair itself to continue to show how dangerous this Nimrod can be. And again, this is a brand new Nimrod that was just created by these scientists in today's time with technology that's so advanced, you're kind of wondering, how were they able to do it so easily? And let me explain how, because you have Cable use his techno-organic arm as a way to connect to the Nimrod's mind. And once he's able to do that alongside other scientists, they all figure what exactly went down here. You see, this newer Nimrod has the programming of the old Nimrod. The old Nimrod was able to copy itself and download itself into the military system as this sleeper virus and waited for the right time to attach itself to, well, the newer Nimrod. And so that explains why this newer Nimrod had ignored all the different programs that the scientists had put inside of it. Now, for Cable, he tells his Nimrod, you should not be here because you come from the future. And with you being here right now in the past, you should not be able to complete your mission because here's the catch. All those different things that you had learned in the far future, why you believe that the mutant race should be killed off as a way to protect the human race, has not happened yet because the future is not for sure. So all those mutants in your files that did bad things down the road from your future, those mutants can change, which means your future can change, which also means your mission is most likely ruined. And so for this Nimrod, he kind of believes in what Cable is saying is true. There's no actual purpose for it here right now because all the things it saw in the far future has not happened yet. And so you had this Nimrod just shut down for the time being. And that really ends the whole Nimrod situation. But the book really ends on the note where we jump over to the home of Cannonball's family. We have the entire family just having dinner with one another. But then at the very last second, there's a knock on the door. And you have one of the brothers of Cannonball go open the door. And that would be Gideon and some other members of the Externals. And this could possibly lead into another storyline where you have X-Force having no choice but to deal with the Externals. But this is where we're going to enter. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And we do go with book 2 of the Phalanx Covenant storyline. Now, the reason why I say book 2 and not like, part 2, because when it came to Marvel back in 1994, they gave this crossover a different kind of treatment. The whole idea that you have 3 different storylines happening all at once at the same exact time. And honestly, it reminded me of Fall of the Mutants because in that crossover, you had each X team handling their own problems, but at the same exact time. And so for this storyline, it's just like that. 3 different things happening, but all at the same exact time. Now, with all that being said, book 1 was really more of Banshee, Emma Frost, Sabretooth, going out of their way to save a group of young mutants that will lead into another X team coming soon, which was Generation X. But book 2 was really more the idea of, okay, cool, let's get X-Force, Excalibur, and X-Factor working together to fight against the Phalanx. Now, I didn't say the X-Men, and the reason why, because by this point, they had already been captured by the Phalanx. And so it's up to the rest of the X teams to save the day. And so as we get into the opening pages for X Factor issue number 106, we really do pick up with the idea of X Factor going over to the old base of the Acolytes. Now, we saw this old base back in Uncanny X-Men issue number 300. Now, this base was used by them, but they've been gone for a long time. But the thing is, we learned that X Factor was called up by Charles Xavier to meet up over there. And the question is, why? Now, when they do arrive at the place, they are confronted by X-Force and also Excalibur. And you have both teams say, hey, X Factor, before you are able to enter the place, we got to make sure it's really you. Because here's the thing, the Phalanx have the ability to pretend to be other people. We saw that back in book 1 when it came to the X-Men. When you have Banshee realize, okay, these guys right here are not my fellow X-Men. It's the Phalanx pretending to be them. But either way, you have X-Factor get very upset about the idea that they're being questioned by these other teams. So you do get a small battle happen here, but after a while, you did have Charles Xavier arrive. Now, when he does arrive, he's able to read the minds of the different members of X-Factor to say, hey, you know what? It's really them. Okay, come inside and let me explain what is happening right now at this moment and why I said meet me here at this place. Now, when it comes to Charles Xavier, he tells us that Muir Island is now officially being controlled by the Phalanx. And here's how. So we get his flashback where you had Nightcrawler call over the school of Charles Xavier. Now, at first, for Nightcrawler, he believed that he was online talking to Beast. But in reality, it was a Phalanx pretending to be BBs. Now, with that phone call, it allowed a Phalanx to be able to kind of teleport through the comm link over to Muir Island to begin a process of taking over the entire island. And so you have the different members of Excalibur, but also Charles Xavier and Moira McTaggart tried their best to just get away from the Phalanx. Now, they barely got away, but Muir Island was completely lost. And so that is why they're currently here at the old base of the Acolytes, somewhere to work out of to hopefully find a way to bring down the Acolytes, to bring down the Phalanx. Now, this is also the other X teams finding out that the X-Men have been captured. Now, you have Shatterstar being very upset about the idea that they're not out there right now trying their best to find the lost X-Men. But you had Charles say, listen, I have Cable and Wolverine on a different mission that could possibly help us to save the X-Men. It's kind of like, okay, cool, that's book 3. We'll cover that tomorrow. But for right now, we're going to focus on our heroes here. Now, you do have Sam realize that Wolfbane had disappeared in the middle of the conversation. And the reason why, because she heard that Excalibur has a new team member. And that new team member is, well, good old Douglock. Now, Douglock is a Phalanx, but he's no longer part of the hive mind of the Phalanx, thanks to Zero, an android from the future who was able to help Douglock break free. Now, here's the thing. Douglock looks just like Doug Ramsey, an old team member of the New Mutants, who had died at the very end of Fall of the Mutants. Now, for Wolfbane, she was there when he died because he basically tried to protect her, and of course, it cost him his life. But on top of that, you have Cannonball walk in as well. And for Cannonball and Wolfbane, they were part of the New Mutants. They saw their old friend die right in front of them. And so to see Doug Ramsey right now in front of them is pretty wild. And I'm kind of wondering, is there a possibility that this Phalanx could be used to kill the rest of them off, or could this Phalanx be used as a way to help them defeat the Phalanx? Now, you have Forge walk into the room. And the reason why, because for Charles, he wants to use Forge as a way to get a better understanding of how the Phalanx truly work. Because with Forge powers, he has the ability to understand how machines work around him. And technically, Phalanx, they are techno-organic beings. They're still machines. And so they're hoping that Forge could use his powers to figure out how they officially work. Now we're also introduced to another phalanx, and that would be Shinar. And I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Shinar, his main goal is to send a message out into space. And this begins the whole idea of us getting like the full origin of the phalanx right in this book right here. Well, not the complete origin, but like most of the pieces we need to get a better idea of how the phalanx truly work. Because right now, the phalanx of Earth are being controlled by a character known as Stephen Lang. Now, when it comes to Stephen Lang, he is or was somebody who was trying his best to kill off the mutant race when he created better versions of the Sentinels. But now it's him trying to use the phalanx as a way to finish his goal, to kill off the mutant race. But the problem is right now, more and more members of the phalanx are able to break away from his control. You have Douglock, you have Shinar, and possibly others. And so you have Steven calling Karen Hodge like, hey, dude, why in the world are we losing control of phalanx left and right? Now, for Karen Hodge, he's like, dude, I have no idea. But my goal right now is to figure out how we are not able to absorb mutants and bring them into the hive mind. That's a big thing right there. The phalanx are able to grab other humans and add them into their army, to add them to the hive mind. But mutants are not able to join their army, to join the hive mind. Something is preventing phalanx to be able to absorb them. And so for Karen Hodge, that is a bigger issue. But also, it kind of shows that Stephen Lang is now officially losing control of the phalanx. But getting back over to Forge, you have Forge still looking at Douglock with some kind of amazement. Seeing the piece of technology in front of him is just throwing him off. Now, for Forge, he does get hit with a feedback. With the powers of Forge, but also the powers of Charles Xavier, there was some kind of feedback that sent Forge flying backwards, but he is okay. Now, for Doug Ramsey, he kind of wants to know the full origin of the phalanx. And really, this is Doug Locke giving us some more information about the phalanx. And so you have Doug Locke say it all begins back at the very end of the extension agenda. Now, with that storyline, you had the death of another character, and that would have been Warlock. Now, when Warlock died, it was a major blow to the X-Men. But here's the thing. You see, with Warlock, he's an alien. He belongs to a race called the Technarch. Now, when it comes to Warlock being dead, for Genosha, they were desperate for money because when their mutants were no longer slaves for their country, they were kind of like, hey, we need some money, so let's go ahead and sell the dead body of Warlock as a way to get some money. Now, with his body being sold, you had a group of scientists whose main purpose was to build up a new type of sentinels. And of course, that would be the phalanx. But at the same time, they wanted somebody to be able to control the phalanx. And that's where Stephen Lang came in. Now, for Stephen, he was in a coma, but his mind had touched the mind of Master Mold. And so, with that right there, they say, you know what? He is the perfect example of the whole idea of being the one to control the phalanx for us. But for Doug Locke, he's saying, but here comes the problem. The phalanx, they are growing. They are evolving. Now, mind you, he's telling Charles Xavier, Forge, Wolfbane, and also Cannonball. Sorry, not Charles Xavier. He walked out the room. But the other three, they're still there. But either way, it's Doug Locke saying, with the phalanx, they have continued to grow and evolve to the point where Stephen Lang is now losing control of the phalanx. And now they're trying to call out to their father race. Because again, they were built off the idea of Warlock, who was an alien. And so with him being an alien, they're kind of like, hey, we're trying to call out to our father race, which is the Technarch, or possibly more members of the Phalanx out there. But right after we were able to get that story, you didn't have Douglock say, you know what, this is the perfect time for me to go ahead and begin my plan, to use Forge as a way to learn more about the Phalanx, to gather more information about them because of his sight when it comes to machines. And so you have Douglock just go ahead and grab Forge, but also Cannonball and Wolfbane. Now, the rest of the heroes, the rest of the X characters in that building, they're trying their best to stop Douglock. But you have Charles say, everyone back away, because I don't believe that Douglock would cause harm to our three heroes at the moment. And so you have Douglock being able to just leave with Wolfbane, Cannonball, and Forge. But the question is right now, where are they going? And that wraps up the first chapter of book number 2. So as we dive into X-Force issue number 38, the second chapter, we pick up with our heroes arriving to the Italian Alps. Now it kind of seems like this could be, or what could possibly be, the main base for the Phalanx. Now, when they do arrive, you have Douglock being very confused about the idea of why Cannonball is mad at him. Now, honestly, he has a good reason, because at the end of the first chapter, you had Douglock just go out of his way to grab Forge, grab Wolfbane, grab Cannonball, and just leave without kind of giving a full-on explanation on why in the world he was doing that. But at the same time, for Cannonball, it's a Phalanx right now pretending to be Doug Ramsey. Now, not completely pretending, but he does resemble Doug Ramsey very well. And so for Cannonball, he's kind of wondering, when is the possibility that Douglock is going to portray them? Now for Wolfbane, she wants to believe that Douglock is Doug Ramsey just coming back from the dead. But at the same time, for Cannonball, he's more of like, you have to be on guard when it comes to your feelings. Because if you try to open up your heart to the idea this guy right here is Doug Ramsey once again coming back to us, then once he leaves, it's going to break your heart even more. But either way for Forge, it's more of like, listen, we can't stand here to argue right now. Let's go ahead and go into that town to do some detective work, to figure out what the Phalanx are truly up to. And so you have our heroes go over to a nearby village. Now, when they do go inside the nearby village, everything looks normal. Everybody looks normal. But it's Douglock saying, listen, in this area of the village or this area of the earth, there's not a huge amount of Phalanx here. But at the same time, it's him saying that the Phalanx are here. But they're doing a good job right now pretending to be other people and looking normal, where you are unable to tell the difference between a Phalanx and a regular human being. So you have to be on guard. But for Douglock, because he is a Phalanx and he was part of the hive mind, he can kind of tell that there are some Phalanx nearby. He can hear all their different wires and cores and circuits all working right now to keep them together. And so we have to jump back over to the other X teams. Now, when we do, it's really more of Moira McTaggart trying her best to figure out what is that connection between Douglock and Doug Ramsey. And so she's trying to use the machine that was left behind by the acolytes to kind of access the mind of Kitty Pryde to get a better idea of what could be that connection. Because once she's able to find that connection, she can use that connection as a way to bring down the Phalanx. Now, I kind of want to jump over to Charles Xavier, because you have Charles Xavier using the astral plane as a way to connect his mind to Forge's mind. Now, when their minds are connected, it's really more of Charles trying to see what Forge sees when it comes to the Phalanx, to get a better idea of how they truly work. Now, you also have Douglock being able to use the transmode virus as a way to enter the mind of Forge. So now all three minds are connected as one. But here comes the big problem. You see, for our three characters, they're beginning to realize what's happening when it comes to the Phalanx. That we have now moved on past the point where This is not going to be just an easy task to get rid of, like the common cold, that the phalanx are way more complex to bring down. But also, it's our heroes finding out that they're now breeding. They're being able to reproduce because you have our heroes being able to find a tower that's being used as a way to make more phalanx. They are growing at a faster rate. But luckily for our heroes, Mormon Taggart believes that she might have a way to, well, bring down the phalanx. It all comes down to her game plan. Now, for Shatterstar, he wants to go ahead and get back out there to fight against them and to hopefully bring them down once and for all. But you have Havoc say, no. We are not going to do that at all. Not until the professor is done with what he is doing upstairs in the astral plane. Now, for Shatterstar, he hates the idea of waiting, but it's everyone else saying, like, we just can't rush into things because you believe that's the best way to bring them down. We don't know completely what we are running into just yet. We need a game plan before we do anything at all. That's the best way we can go when it comes to saving the X-Men. But as we jump back over to Forge, Wolfbane, and also Cannonball, you have those heroes find a brand new phalanx that quickly tries to connect to Forge. And the reason why, because Forge in the past was also given the transmode virus. And so because he had that virus, for this phalanx, it's kind of like, oh, you know what? You are a perfect target for me to attach to and become my host for me. Now you have Charles Xavier trying his best to help out Forge, but the problem is, while being connected to Forge, but also the phalanx as well, it allowed Charles to realize what the phalanx is trying to do now. The phalanx is no longer trying to just go after the mutant race like Stephen Lang wants them to do. It's now the phalanx saying, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and go after the entire planet. Animals, humans, whatever. Let's go ahead and try to absorb the entire planet for our own. And so now it's Charles freaking out because once he does lose connection to Forge, you have Charles tell everything he just learned to the rest of the X teams. They're now freaking out. And so for Charles Xavier, he said, listen, we have to break up into two teams. One team must go out of their way to help out Forge and the others, while the rest of our heroes stay here to protect Moira Taggart so she's able to continue on with her project. Now, you're probably wondering, like, what about the X-Men? That's Jean Grey and Cyclops' goal, and we'll see them work in book 3. But either way, it's Charles saying, we gotta do what we gotta do to hopefully save the world, but also save ourselves as well. Now, getting back over to Forge and the others, we do learn that Douglock gave Forge, Wolfbane, and also Cannonball the transmode virus as a way to hide them from the other phalanx. Now, you still have our heroes trying their best to investigate the area, and when they do, they find a spire. And you have Douglock say, this is actually a problem now because now they're trying to call in the other parts of the race that's out there in space. And so right now, it's our heroes freaking out because sooner or later, you're going to have more phalanx appear. And when they do, things can truly pop off when they do appear. And so now we are able to get into the final chapter of this storyline. And we do pick up with our heroes Forge, Cannonball, and Wolfbane not believing what they are seeing. This huge spire that could be used as a way to call in more phalanx over to Earth. Now, with all that being said, you did have our heroes be confronted by Shinar. Now, for Shinar, it's more of like, hey, listen, I see you guys, and the only person I want right now is Forge. Forge can be used as a way to help us complete our goal. And so right now, it's our heroes wondering, what in the world could they do with Forge? And this begins the whole progress of everything going south for our heroes over here, because you have Cannonball begin to fight against the different members of the Phalanx. As a matter of fact, you have Wolfbane join in as well. Now, for Wolfbane, she believes that Douglock will help out because In her mind, that is still Doug Ramsey, her long lost friend. And so she even asked him, hey, I need your help. Let's go ahead and help out Cannonball to fight against the different members of the Phalanx. There's also innocent people who are being carried away to be sooner or later turned to more Phalanx and join the hive mind. They gotta protect those people as well. But then out of nowhere, when you have Wolfbane turn around, Cannonball has been knocked out by Douglock. And then you have Douglock knock out Wolfbane. And so now we're seeing Douglock saying that he's on the side of the Phalanx now. Now, for Shinar, he does not believe in the possibility that now for Douglock, he's back on their side again. And so you have Shinar just go ahead and knock out Douglock as well. And he tells the rest of the Phalanx to take Douglock, Wolfbane, and Cannonball and begin to use them as a way to help build up their spire even more. But on top of that, you also have Shinar tell Forge, oh, we still need your help, Forge. We have a different task for you. But now we have to jump over to Havoc. Now, when we do, this section at first is being used as a way to kind of recap everything that happened so far in this crossover, because book 1, book 2, and book 3 are all happening at the same exact time. Now, with that being said, it's also Havoc saying that for the X-Men, or really all the X teams, they have gone out of their way many times to, protect the entire world from different kinds of threats. But the problem is some of those threats came from the human race, who have been trying to kill off the mutant race. And the problem is their creations always go too far, to the point where they're now trying to kill off both mutants and humans. And here we are again, the whole idea of the Phalanx wanting to kind of absorb the entire planet. Now you do have Havoc be confronted by Shatterstar and Warpath. Now, really, this is more of a Shatterstar problem because he's a hothead. He hates the idea of just waiting. He feels like all the X teams should go out of their way to just attack the Phalanx nonstop to get their friends back and to go ahead and kill off the Phalanx. But it's Havoc saying, that's dumb. Like you have no plan there. It's just you wanting to rush in and make things a whole lot worse. That is why you're on my team, the backup team that has to wait for the moment, while the main team goes in on a stealth mission to hopefully bring down the Phalanx. But again, it's Havoc saying, you have to relax, Shatterstar, because if you go out there as a hothead, you have the possibility of ruining everything for us. And that right there is not okay at all. Now, for Shatterstar argument is also being used as a recap as well, but that's the main point right there, though, is him being a hothead. But now we jump over to Shinar and also Forge. Now, this is the moment where we do learn why Shinar wanted Forge for. And we kind of find out that it's all because he wants Forge to create a device that will allow power to flow into the eggs of the Phalanx to help give birth to more Phalanx. Now, Forge is not going to say no. And here's the reason why. Because he loves what he is seeing. This man loves working on machines. And earlier, he was really amazed when he saw Douglock. He's kind of like, oh my God, look at this creature. Look at this machine. And so right now, even though he knows how bad it could be for more Phalanx to be on Earth, he loves the idea of working on this project. Now, this kind of leads into a problem I had with the storyline because we jump back over to Douglock, Cannonball, and also Wolfbane. Now, when we do learn here why you had Douglock betrayed our heroes earlier for. And it's all about the idea that the mutants cannot be absorbed by the Phalanx at all, but humans can. But when it comes to Douglock, what he wanted to do was absorb Cannonball and Wolfbane and use their mutant DNA as a way to kind of be undetected as he works his way up the tower to hopefully bring down the tower from the inside out. Because if he goes by himself, they're going to realize it's him trying to destroy the entire tower. But if he has mutant DNA inside of him, then they will never see him coming. Now, for Cannonball and Wolfbane, they're kind of like, dude, that's not cool because once again, it's you not sharing your game plan with us. It's just you saying like, hey, you know what? We're going to do this and let's go now. And so it's Cannonball being like, we have to work together when it comes to completing this goal. Now, for me, it's kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, I get it. You hate the idea that you weren't told about his plan, but at the same time, his plan can still work as a way to bring down the entire tower. But instead, you now have Cannonball, Wolfbane, and Douglock climbing the tower from the outside, which for me is just wild. But now we jump over to Nightcrawler's team. Now for Nightcrawler's team, it's Nightcrawler, Boom Boom, Shadowcat, Richter, Daytripper, Siren, and also Polaris as they work their way over to where Forge and his team is at the moment. Now, on their way over there, we kind of get into the idea of the possibility that Shadowcat might leave Excalibur. And the reason why? Because so much has happened to her in a very short period of time. But the biggest thing is that her father has now gone missing. But also the idea of the death of Ileana at the very beginning of Fatal Attractions. But now this with Douglock, she kind of hates where everything's going for her life. Now for our heroes, they also realize that their sonar is picking up on Phalanx members nearby. The problem is they don't see any. And the reason why? Because the Phalanx have the ability to shapeshift, to pretend to be something or someone else. Now you do have our heroes land their craft in the area, and you didn't have our heroes begin to fight against the Phalanx that had surrounded them. We also get another page where you basically have Forge still continuing to work on the project that was given to him by Shannara. But you also have Shannara freak out because now he knows what's happening, that they are trying to attack the Spire. So you have Shannara leave to go deal with that situation. But now we have to jump inside the Spire, and we pick up with Wolfbane, Douglock, and Cannonball. Now, for Douglock, he tells us, the readers, that the villagers from earlier who returned to Phalanx, they're now part of the Spire, and their energy is being used as a way to power up the Spire to now be used as a beacon to call more Phalanx to Earth. Now, you do have Douglock say, if somebody's able to go inside the Spire to cut out that power, then most likely the power will die, but the villagers will then turn back to normal again. And so you have Cannonball wanting to be the one to do it. And here's the reason why, because he blames himself for the death of Doug Ramsey, of course, the guy who died at the end of Fall of the Mutants. And so it's Douglock saying, listen, I am built off the dead cells of Warlock, but also Doug Ramsey. And here's the thing. I know that Doug would hate the idea of you blaming yourself for his death. But on top of that, he would not allow you to do this at all. And so you have Douglock go inside the tower to be the one to hopefully save the day. Now, on the outside of the tower, you do have Nightcrawler team arrive. So their main goal now is to fight against the Phalanx, but also Shannara as well. The battle does go on for a good amount of few pages here. But you have Nightcrawler go out of his way to find Forge. Now for Forge, he tells Nightcrawler, like, listen, because of my mutant power to help me understand how machines work, is somehow they're able to influence me to help them with their plans. I cannot break free. But it's Nightcrawler saying, Forge, you have to find a way to break free, because if you don't, things are only going to get worse. So please find a way to break free. Now, this kind of leads into the whole idea of the story beginning to wrap up, because we jump back over to our heroes watching what's happening to the Spire. It is completely falling apart. But for our heroes, they're kind of wondering in the possibility, is Douglock dead? Because he went inside there and he said, like, hey, if somebody does go inside, then most likely they are going to die. But then at the very last second, you didn't have Douglock reappear. Now, when he does, it's him saying, like, hey, I plan on staying with you guys, Excalibur, and continue to learn what it's like to be a human. It's him saying that I'm not going anywhere at all for this time period. And so everyone is happy to see that Douglock did survive, but also Shannara and the Spire are officially gone. And so you have book 2 kind of end on the note where you have Forge being able to finally fight back against the control of his mutant ability and being able to get rid of the eggs that the Phalanx had laid out in this area. And so the book kind of ends on that note, and now we are able to go ahead and dive into book 3 tomorrow. But with that being said, okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over X-Men comics, where now we pick up with X-Force issue number 39. Now, with this issue alone, I want to say that this is kind of like closing off an era of X-Men comics and beginning a new era for X-Men comics, especially for X-Force. And the reason why I'm saying that because after this issue, you kind of had different covers of the later issues being more flashy, trying to pull you in more to read more X-Men comics, X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Excalibur, anything that belongs in the X world. And so with that being said, it kind of felt like it was Marvel saying, hey, you know what? X-Force has been one of our best X titles. We'll go ahead and wrap up this era and begin a new one with issue number 40. And you see what I mean as we go through today's storyline. Now, real quickly, guys, letting you know I'm sick, so if I sound kind of weird or off, please forgive me. I'm trying my best to recover, but at the same time, the videos gotta come out for you guys. But either way, getting into today's storyline, we do pick up with Domino. Now, when it comes to Domino, she's right now at the base of X-Force, and one of these sensors had picked up on an intruder. So her goal right now is to figure out who is trying to invade the base of X-Force. But while out there, she finds this robot. Now, at first, she has no idea who or what this robot is. But then after a while, she begins to learn that the robot is actually the professor. Now remember, the professor is an AI system that Cable used. And matter of fact, I kind of feel like this is a perfect time to kind of sit down and explain the origin of the professor. Now, we don't have all the pieces just yet because there's still some other storylines down the road that kind of feed into the actual origin of the professor, but we do have most of the info by this point in our coverage. Like, for example, we got to go way back in time. Now, when we do, we have to remember that back in the past, for the professor, he was not known as the professor, he was known as the ship. And matter of fact, in the past, when it came to ship, he arrived on Earth centuries ago. But when he did, he was founded by Apocalypse. Now, before Apocalypse had found the ship, we have to remember that the Celestials had created the ship as a way to collect data on the Earth, to kind of watch over the Earth. But while being there, you had Apocalypse being able to find the ship. And so over the next few centuries, you had Apocalypse being able to use a ship for his own personal gain. Now, after a few centuries, you did have Apocalypse run into the original version of X-Factor, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Archangel, and also Beast. Now, they were able to defeat Apocalypse and gain control over the ship, where they had learned the origin of the ship. But here's the thing, because there was a storyline called X Factor Endgame. Now, in that storyline, we saw Apocalypse be able to give young Nathan the techno-organic virus. Now, when it came to Cyclops, he only had one choice as a way to save his son's life, to hand his son over to the Ascati. Now, when it came to the Ascati, they took young Nathan into the far future. Now, you're probably wondering, what in the world does young Nathan have to do with the ship? You see, when it came to young Nathan, when he had traveled into the far future, you had a ship being able to kind of give young Nathan a barrier as it traveled into the far future. Now, once you had young Nathan being able to arrive in the far future, the ship kind of hidden inside the body of Nathan. And so after many years had passed by, we kind of find out that the ship was still inside the body of young Nathan. But the problem was it had forgotten its past completely. And so then over the next few years, you had his ship take up a new name, better known as the Professor. So the Professor has no idea that in the past he was known as the ship who fought alongside with X Factor and other X-like characters. But either way, it seems like now he has his own body, no longer being his AI system that was riding in the body of Cable. But getting back into the main storyline, we do pick up with the Professor waking back up after Domino had found him. Now, here's the thing, because when it comes to the Professor, with his brand new body, he's now going by a different name, calling himself Prosh. Now, here's the thing, though, because we have no idea how in the world he was able to gain a brand new body. But on top of that, after Domino had found him, well, apparently his brand new body ran out of power, and so she had no choice but to go ahead and hook him up to the power system of the X-Force base in Cape Verde. Now again, the big question is, how in the world did Professor get a brand new body used here in the present day? And so you have Prosh say, you know what? Let me go ahead and play this video to kind of show you how I was able to gain this brand new body. Now, it is a very quick and fast origin story for Prosh here. And we learned that basically in the middle of the whole idea of the Phalanx Covenant storyline, you had a Phalanx appear at the base of X-Force. Now, the main goal for that Phalanx was to be able to absorb the different members of X-Force, but they were away with Excalibur and also X-Factor. And so you had that Phalanx try to hack into their system. Unfortunately, it was zapped and just killed off right then and there when it tried to access the system of X-Force base. And so when it came to Professor, now known as Prosh, he thought, well, there's a good body right there that's not being used at all. And so you have Prosh just go ahead and take over the body of, well, the Phalanx that had supposedly died in the base of X-Force. But this kind of leads into a problem because we do pick up with Shatterstar. Now for Shatterstar, we do learn here that every single time he learns something new, over the next couple of days or weeks or even hours sometimes, he's able to master what he is learning. So for example, he was able to kind of look into the system to kind of realize that he is unable to figure out how much power that Prosh is using right now from the base to be alive. And that is a huge problem. There's some kind of interference. But they do know what they do. To keep Prosh alive, they need a huge amount of power to be able to keep him alive. And so for X-Force, they love the idea the Professor now has his own body, calling himself Prosh. It kind of feels like he's part of their team now. And so their goal is to go ahead and just continue on with their lives, but alongside with Prosh. Now, some days have passed by, and we do see kind of X-Force just hanging out around the base. Now, we see the team playing football, and really, if you're an X-Men fan, you know that no matter what X team you're following, when it comes to some downtime for that X team, they're going to play some kind of sports game. Baseball or softball or kickball or even football and basketball. Either way, for X-Force right now, they're playing some good old football. Now, matter of fact, we kind of focus on the whole idea of Warpath and also Siren, because remember, these two characters are kind of beginning a relationship earlier on in our coverage over X-Force. And so by this point, it's really more Warpath trying his best to confirm that relationship. The whole idea that he wants to be with her. And so he goes in for a kiss, but unfortunately, a football does hit him in the head to kind of ruin that moment for him. But while you have X-Force playing some good old football out there, we see Domino watching them. Now, for Domino, she kind of hates the idea that she's not really able to kind of being able to bond with the other members of X-Force. And the reason why, because in the early days of X-Force comics, Domino was not Domino. We saw her, but it was somebody else pretending to be her, a person known as Vanessa, who's very close to Deadpool. But either way, even though we now have the real Domino, she kind of hates the idea that she might give the rest of the members of X-Force a reason why to not trust her. But either way, we also learn that there's something going on with Cable, that the techno-organic virus is going wild in his body, and we have no idea why in the world the virus is going wild in his body for. But later on that evening, we do pick up with Richter and Shatterstar. Now, when we do, it's really more a Shatterstar telling Richter, like, hey, listen, there's something going on with our tech. Like some kind of interference is popping up in every single piece of our equipment. And I have no idea where in the world it's coming from. Now, it's going to be somewhat important for the ending of this storyline. But while you have those two characters trying to figure out what in the world is going on, we jump over to Warpath and also Cannonball. And when we do, we see the two young heroes right now kind of wondering what in the world is going on with the IPAC. Now, the IPAC is a ship or aircraft that our heroes use as a way to travel around the world. The problem is it's evolving or changing, and they have no idea why in the world this is happening for. But this kind of leads into the ending for today's storyline because we do pick up everyone realizing what has been happening at the base is all because of Posh, because of his brand new body. And so you didn't have our heroes realize that the only way to kind of make sure everything goes back to normal, but also kind of allowing Cable to survive, because again, with Prosh being there, the techno-organic virus is going wild in his body. Prosh has to go away. But the problem is Prosh needs a huge amount of energy to keep him charged up so that he can stay alive, which means that for X-Force, they're going to have to hand over a lot of different pieces of equipment to allow Prosh to stay alive. But most of this equipment came with Cable from the future. And so it's kind of like, hey, Cable, are you okay with the idea of giving up every single piece of things you brought from your time into the past as a way to remember everything you came from to keep this one robot alive? And for Cable, it's a yes, because right now, those things no longer matter to him. That right now, X-Force, who's kind of like a family to him, that matters a whole lot more. But also, him and Professor, they have a tight bond. He hates the idea of allowing Professor to lose his body and to no longer be Prosh. So he's kind of like, no, go ahead, take everything with you. And so just like that, you have Prosh leave and say goodbye to X-Force, but to also now have the ability to stay alive thanks to them handing over all of their equipment. And so the book kind of ends on the note where you now have our heroes wondering, like, okay, where can we go now? Like, our base is completely empty, and that guy right there took all of our equipment. And you have Domino say, don't worry, I think I have an idea for our new base. And let's not forget that in an earlier video, her and Cable, they were trying their best to find a new base for X-Force. So this is the perfect time to go to this new supposed base. But either way, this is where we're gonna end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.